See, look at that. I forgot to turn on the recording thing. Anyways, there's a camera right beside this camera where I'm recording the class. So these classes are on YouTube. So you can go to YouTube and basically they'll come up about a day or two after and you can watch them. They're actually being recorded in 4K and hopefully you can't hear too much of the I don't know why there's a chainsaw. There should not be a chainsaw right there. Not quite sure what's going on. Also, for all of the class information and all that kind of stuff, we have the documentation on GitHub Silicon Dojo, online classes, and you can find things like the paperwork. So what we're going to be doing for the class today, code, all of that kind of thing. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, you can just find me under Eli Etherton. You see that. Follow me or whatever else. And yeah, let's see here. Very distracting to have that thing there. Let's see here, donor box. These are free to the end user classes. That does not actually mean they're free. I do need to make money somehow. We don't have sponsors. YouTube doesn't pay too much anymore. There is a donor box link somewhere around. If you'd like to click on that donor box link and throw a couple of dollars in, that would be absolutely awesome to keep this thing going. Just so you know, I'm going to All Things Open in Raleigh. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday of next week, I don't know, 4 or 5 days from now. So if you're going to that, I'll be there. Say hi. If you don't know about that and you're in the area, actually looks like a really good conference. It costs about $300 to get in, so you might want to go there. Yeah, if you have any questions during the class, do raise your hand. Raise your hand in the class. As soon as I see that you've raised your hand, and I have a moment, I will stop and try to answer your question. Do not try to raise your hand like this, because I won't see it. And with that, we will actually get into the class today. And yeah, if you see me being spastic, it's just been a fucking spastic time. Again, there's nothing quite like a biblical disaster just to throw the wrench into your life. But it is important. One of the lessons in life, I think about this with people and doing stuff, going out there and doing things, is that it's okay to be depressed, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to stop. Right? I think about this when my wife had cancer. My wife has had 3 cancers. So she was going into surgery, major surgery for one of the cancers. I forget which one. Anyways, before we knew that she had the cancer, I was still doing consulting and business work and that kind of stuff. And so I'd signed up to have a booth at a trade show. And then just how things work out, how life works out. The day of her surgery was the day of the damn trade show. And so it was really weird. I was going to be like dropping her off to do surgery and then running off to, hey, buy my product. Anyways, so I was talking to her about that, and it wasn't that much money to be part of the trade show. And I was like, I don't know. Should I drop out? Should I still do this? And she looked at me. She's like, well, Eli, this is so fucked up. She's like, well, if I die, I want to make sure you still have something to do. So go do a trade show. And that sums up my life, way too much of my life. And even though it sounds very horrific, it actually is very true. Even if you're depressed and you're sad and there's bad stuff going on in your life, just curling up in a ball doesn't necessarily help you out. You still want to keep pushing that ball forward because at least you've pushed that ball forward a little bit. So it's one of those things to think about. Real men do cry as they're doing the dump run. Right? If the flood has destroyed... Whoops. The hell?
Hi, Eli. Good.
Hello. Why can any... No, unmute yourself. No, I'm talking here. Anyway, don't know what that was about. But anyways, it's okay to cry during the dump run. The important thing is that you do the dump run. And so that's what we're going to go through. We're going to do this class. You're going to learn some stuff. We're going to see how it goes. Okay, we are going to admit Mel. And again, if you actually have a question, raise your hand. We got a thumb up from Mohammed. So we actually got quite a few people here today. So cybersecurity for programmers. This may be a misnomer. Again, I'm creating all these classes, so how the classes actually work out at the end. You're learning cybersecurity. Is it specifically for programmers? Sure, we'll say that. I don't know. One of the things, I always go back to stories about life, basically how you become who you become. One of the things I think about when I think about cybersecurity or really being a consultant or being a professional actually goes back decades ago at this point to when I did not think I was going to be doing computers. Back when I wanted to kick indoors and shoot people, as I used to say. Anyways, I was going through executive protection training. So executive protection training is essentially high-level bodyguard work. It was actually really interesting. I went through one of the top schools in the country, and they go through, and going through one of the top schools in the country, they teach you a lot of boring crap that you don't want to learn, right? We got to learn how to drive cars and shoot things and all kinds of other fun stuff. But there was a lot of boring talky talk, right? But one of the interesting things there is they were showing us some of the hand-to-hand stuff. Again, basically being able to disengage. So if you're doing protection work, you have the principal. The principal is the person that you're trying to protect. And the idea is your core intent is to always disengage the principal from any potential attacker or adversary. But you want to do it as calmly and as easily as possible, right? So you get a lot of these MMA folks in there that want to be bodyguards. And the thing is, like, you have your principal here, and then somebody comes up to shake their hand or do something stupid, and one of these big, Arnold Schwarzenegger bodyguards just cold cocks the bastard, right? Crack! And they're like, yes, I'm a bodyguard. One of the things they warned us about, especially when you're doing this for superstars and executives and that kind of thing, is if you cold cock the bastard, and you get your principal home, and then your principal gets sued for $5 million a month from now, you have not actually, in fact, protected your principal, right? Protecting your principal means you go through the day, and then everybody forgets about that day and goes on to the next one. It's not about you being tough. It's not about you being strong. It's not about you being Bruce Lee. It's about the principal goes through their day, is able to do their work, goes home, and that's it. And so sometimes, again, if somebody's being a little too handsy, you keep everything nice and tight and smooth, and keep the principal moving. There's no cold cocking. There's no all fancy beat the crap out of them. You just push them away and keep going. If your principal is out at the bar, 2 o'clock in the morning, starting to do shots, you look at the principal and go, hey, yeah, these shots are awesome. Hey, do you remember we have this really good bottle of scotch back at the hotel room? Why don't we bring a couple of people back to the hotel room and get the fuck out of this bar at 2 o'clock in the morning? Right? That's the kind of work to keep your principal protected. Basically, your principal is safe, and you've done your job if your principal doesn't get sued, doesn't get attacked, all of these other things. And I think about that a lot when I deal with technology professionals, because there's this real idea with technology professionals of this is my job, right? My job is to code. My job is to set up firewalls. My job is to do networking. My job. No, your job is to make sure the infrastructure functions. Sometimes it's doing configurations. Sometimes it's negotiating maintenance contracts. Sometimes it's figuring out the laws and regulations that revolve around your particular area. Sometimes there's a lot of these other things that go around you being a professional other than simply whether or not you can do the configurations, right? Again, I have seen this. I have had to clean this mess up. You have cybersecurity jackasses out there that lock down systems to the point that they no longer function for the company, and they think they're doing a good job. And you're like, what? And why is Google updating? Right? That is not it. The company, basically your job is to make sure the company continues to function. If the company's functioning, you're doing your good job. If you do all the configurations in the world and your company tanks, that's not the job. When you think about cybersecurity, one of the biggest things to understanding, and we think about threats, what are the threats against you and your infrastructure? Your number one threat is going to be you. I can guarantee you the person that's going to destroy your infrastructure is going to be you. You're going to be the biggest mess. And the reason is because you're going to be the one that is actually going to be touching your infrastructure the most. Doing firewall configurations, doing proxy configurations, doing intrusion detection, antivirus, all that kind of thing. I know I'm not supposed to say it, but it is true. You are going to fat finger not just something, but over your career a lot of things. So one of the things that you need to be thinking about with this is, again, when you build out your systems, how can you design your systems so that you can't screw up your systems. Again, we talk about zero trust, right? Zero trust environments. But everybody is kind of like, yeah, but you trust me. I mean, zero. We don't trust anybody. I mean, but me, and well, my friend over here, and that person. I mean, you trust us. Zero trust means you don't trust anybody else. No, one of the things to be thinking about is when you're building out all of your systems, when you're building out your infrastructure, how can you protect your systems and your infrastructure from you doing something colossally stupid? Again, I think about this back in the day. I had a buddy of mine. The company had her working 100 hours a week, which is not good. I don't care what Elon Musk or any other jackass says. Don't work 100 hours a week. Anyway, she was working so much she could barely see straight, and they were doing a massive migration, right? So I worked for a major corporation. They had a massive customized CRM solution back in the day, customer relationship management. Basically all the information for all of our customers that actually paid back in the day when customers paid. Anyway, and they were doing a massive migration. They were moving from this server stack to this server stack. And it was in Unix. There, she was a Unix admin. So anyways, they had spent weeks doing this migration. And then the final thing was basically deleting and shutting down the original server stack. She literally said, she typed in the command to delete the server stack that they had migrated to, and she fat-fingered the command so it failed. It was like this was Saturn and this was Jupiter, so the old one was Saturn and the new stack was Jupiter. And she was so tired, and so she had to delete Saturn, but she just had Jupiter on the brain, so she was like, remove, blah, blah, RM, star, all that kind of shit, and she put in like Jupiter. She put in Jupiter. And then it failed because she fat-fingered one of the commands. It's Unix, don't do it quite right. She's like, oh, that was dumb. And then she put in the correct command to wipe out Jupiter. And so our entire CRM solution for a very big corporation disappeared. That is a true story. Are you setting up your systems so that you can't be that particular person? And the worst part about it was that she wasn't fired. I know what some of you people are going to be like, oh my God, she must have been fired that day. No, her boss was like, yeah, we have been working you pretty hard. That's the worst part. When you wipe out the entire CRM solution for a corporation and your boss is like, fair enough. That's when you probably need to go to a different company. So the number one threat is you. The number two threat, again, I'm going to say something. You're all going to hate it. You really know. You need to take agency in your own goddamn career. Again, as I say, I'm going to have to kiss ass. If I want sponsors, if I want resources, I will have to kiss ass. So I want to kiss rich person ass. I do not want to kiss homeless ass. No offense to the homeless people, but they're fucking homeless. They don't got resources that I need. That's one of the things to be thinking about for the company that you work for. Because I've heard this so much from so many of my viewers. Again, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meetings with my viewers. And they're all like, Eli, my employer is such an asshole. My employer doesn't give us anything. My employer never gives us enough resources or any of this other kind of horse crap. And it's like, well, why do you keep working for this employer? What? Well, I know you can't switch tomorrow. It's not like going from McDonald's to Wendy's. But you can put your resume on LinkedIn and find a company that has resources, right? When you're working for a crappy company, what I'll tell you is companies that duct tape together solutions when you're working 100 hours a week with duct tape solutions and the rest of it, they also have much, much, much more significant problems. So again, don't get me wrong. Again, you're going to be in the corporate world. Crap's going to blow up. There's going to be major migrations, whatever. There will be times you're going to be working your ass off for a week, a month, a couple of months. But it shouldn't be your career. It shouldn't be years. Fuck, it should not be years. So if you're always duct taping together, week after week, month after month, you can even see a year on the horizon, get the hell out of that company. Wouldn't you rather worry about cybersecurity issues with a company that is going to provide you resources? That's just something for you folks to be thinking about there. When you think about an incident, and again, I'll talk about it more incident here, we talk about cybersecurity. A lot of times when people think about cybersecurity, again, it's that whole Zimbabwean ninja hackers. Oh, what are the Zimbabwean hackers going to do to my systems? And again, most likely the Zimbabwean hackers are not going to do a damn thing to your systems. You're going to be the one to delete the system. So anyways, when you think about things like cybersecurity, really think about it as an incident. Again, whether it's a hacker, whether it's somebody unplugging the plug, whether it's a biblical flood, right? Think about this. Again, when you hear about ransomware attacks, one of the reasons that I believe many of these administrators should literally be sued and go to jail for gross negligence is when you look at a lot of these ransomware attacks. Basically, fundamentally, what happens? Your database is no longer accessible, right? From a technical standpoint, that is all that has happened. Whether it is a ransomware attack, whether it is a flood, whether it is a fire, whether somebody yanked a damn cord out of the wall, and everything's a layer 1 issue at the end of the day, all that really happens with a ransomware attack is your data is no longer accessible. So when you see companies that get hit by ransomware attacks, realize they were not simply vulnerable to a ransomware attack. They were also vulnerable to a flood, to a fire, to any other number of disasters out there. And their CTO, CIO, director, the whole 9 yards, basically did not look at solving those types of problems. So you think about this as incidents rather than the specific attacks. I think it's a lot better way of looking at a lot of this stuff. Let's see. In order to have an incident, you need to have the vulnerability. You need to have the vulnerability. The vulnerability needs to exist, right? So you have a server that is running Active Directory. You have a server that's running whatever kind of services. That actually has to be a vulnerability. If you have a whole bunch of servers that are running and aren't actually doing anything for your company, which you probably do, they're not actually vulnerable. Doesn't really matter. You need a vector for the attack. How is somebody actually going to pull off the attack, right? If you have port 22 open, right? So vulnerability. If you have port 22 open on one of your servers internally, but the firewall, your external firewall, blocks all port 22 traffic. If somebody in the outside world tries to brute force attack on port 22 on your internal server, there is no actual vector there. There has to be a way to actually be able to do the attack. And then there actually has to be an attack itself. And I think that's one of the important things to be thinking about in this modern world, especially with everybody wanting to get into politics. I'm gonna say something out, but you say something, right? Controversial. Maybe your company shouldn't get into politics, right? Because there is nothing to make people want to attack your company faster than saying what color you support in this particular Super Bowl. Right? But that's an important thing to understand. If nobody's actually attacking your systems in one shape or form, right, then there isn't actually an incident. So you need the vulnerability, you need the vector, and you need the attack. If you don't have those, you do not have an incident. When you're thinking about all this kind of stuff, again, we're going to get to the boring work. The boring work is what your job actually is. Again, when I go talk about executive protection, right, executive protection, J-turns, and the L-turns or whatever, shooting things. That's what you think executive protection is about. What it's really about is dum-da-dum, da-dum-da-dum. You dum-da-dum most of the time, right? Anyways, the same thing is true in the technology world, right? Most of your job isn't actually going to be out there tip-tap typing, at least if you're going to be in a decision-making role, right? Most of your job is actually going to be documentation and planning. Thinking about what you're going to do. Going to all of the interested parties and asking them, if you do what you plan, is it going to fuck anything up? Going to the interested parties and say, hey, is there anything that I should know about that I might not know about? Sitting there and having many boring conversations, right? Again, I know everybody hates, conferences and all that kind of stuff. And again, whatever meetings, everybody hates meetings nowadays. And again, there's an argument about how modern corporations do meetings, whether or not that's functional. But the fact of the matter is you're going to need to talk and communicate with a lot of people and plan what you're going to do and get a lot of buy-in before you do anything properly. And that's one of the things I see with a lot of folks out there. Again, they just want to go straight into whatever security or whatever else. It's like, go talk with folks. Document what you've done for the next generation. Again, that's one of the big problems that I see with a lot of folks out there is you don't document things properly, especially with security, right? Because how you do security, right? It's kind of like building a wall. There's 50 different ways to build a wall. There's 50 different ways to do security. Right? You can set up all kinds of systems. But if your peers or the next generation down the pike don't understand how the systems are set up, right? If somebody changes the wrong configuration somewhere and everything goes down, again, down, whether it's a hacker or down because of a stupid configuration change, all the company knows is that the systems are down. You need to make sure that you document the hell out of what you do, and you actually put it out there in a fashion that people can understand. And again, think about this for the next generation. A lot of times when I talk to new people, even older people, there's this idea, well, Eli, I understand. So yeah, but what happens if you have a heart attack? Well, I'm not going to have a heart attack. Well, yeah, you don't get to make that decision in life, right? And again, that's one of the big things to be thinking about. Again, what if you want to leave the company? What if you get a great job offer to go somewhere else? You have not documented what you've done for security or anything like that, and then you're just dumping all this crap on the next poor slob. That is going to be just a nasty thing. The other thing to be thinking about with the documentation is maintaining and updating it. So you created the documentation, right? You had the plan, plan the work and work the plan. You did all of that. You created all this great documentation. You throw it into the file server or whatever else, and you forget about it. You never update it ever again. You got to make sure that you're going to update it, maintain it. 90% of your time should go into planning, and basically more or less 10% should go into implementation. Again, sitting there and figuring out what it is you're trying to accomplish and trying to mitigate any potential problems that your users may have. And Emma is coming in. Emma's coming in 35 minutes late. Emma, if I gave grades, I would fail you. But I don't give grades, so you're fine. Procedures, things to be thinking about. When an event occurs, somebody has hacked your systems. Right? The Zimbabwean has gotten in and hacked your systems. Okay, now what happens? Have you ever had that happen? It's like, oh, look, we have a problem. And then 5 people are going, yep, we got a problem. It's like, but seriously, who do we tell about this problem? Make sure you document what the hell happens when an event occurs, and make sure you have a process for communicating with vested interests, right? When your systems go down, who actually needs to be communicated with? Again, a lot of people think the CEO. Oh my God, get the CEO on the phone. The CEO needs to know what's going on. The CEO might not care. The CEO is like, yeah, fine. What, have you talked with the warehouse manager? This affects the warehouse manager. This doesn't affect me, right? So there's a failure. Who are you going to be talking to, again, to keep the users happy? Periodically verify your documentation and procedures. Did a point of contact go on parental leave, and would you find out if they did? Again, this is the other big thing with documentation. People create documentation and they forget about it. Right? Have you ever seen that? Point of contact? Have you ever seen a point of contact list where half the people no longer work at the company? Not nearly as amusing as I'm making it sound. Again, so with the documentation and procedures, are you going through it once a month just to verify, is this still the operations manager? Is this still whoever the hell else? Go through it. Make sure your documentation is accessible if you have a biblical flood. Again, I talk about a biblical flood, and it sounds funny. The only reason I laugh, because it's a horrible thing, right? What happens if a biblical flood goes through and wipes out your office building? What happens if your office building no longer exists? Here's a question. How do you access your procedures for when your office building no longer exists? Oh, it's easy, Eli. You just go into my office, and on the top shelf, there's a big 3-ring binder, and that has all the procedures for if our offices disappear. It's like, okay, yeah, but your office did disappear. Ergo, that 3-ring binder disappeared. So now how do you get to the information? Again, it's funny until you got to deal with it. Let's see here. Resources. This is going to be the big thing. Again, a lot of new people, they come in there and they think when they're going to be technology professionals, they're going to do everything. That is not the case. I will tell you, if anybody wants to hire me, I can accomplish anything you give me the resources to accomplish. Right? Am I Bill Gates? Am I all these smart people? No. But if you give me $5 billion, I can go hire the smart people. Right? That's one of the big things in the technology world. Again, it doesn't really get talked about a whole lot. It gets talked about, but it's kind of more implied than actually very explicit. Literally, you can accomplish basically whatever your executives give you the resources to accomplish. If you're given duct tape, you can do whatever you can do with duct tape. If you're given $10 million, you can do whatever you want to do with $10 million. I mean, I think about this with resources. So back with one of the corporations I worked with, again, hilarious real world, lived experience, right? So anyways, our office was worried. This was actually before September 11th too. They knew, they were in the secure area, and there's no floods, there were no hurricanes, there was no earthquakes. But again, we had a forward-thinking CEO that had the idea of what happens if our headquarters stopped existing. Again, we had thousands and thousands of employees, lots and lots and lots of stuff. What happened if headquarters go boom one day? And he actually was far enough thinking to think about that. And so we had a lot of weird facilities around. Anyways, so we had this one facility, I think it was out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. Anyways, we had this Cheyenne, Wyoming facility, and I went to go meet the guy there because it was before disaster recovery. Again, this was 20 plus years ago, so I wanted to talk with the guy. He was a great guy. He was a great guy. He got hired by the company for a lot of money, and basically he was given the funding to basically be able to stand up an infrastructure that could basically come online if our headquarters went boom. It was great. Like, wow, right? He got millions and millions of dollars. He had top-of-the-line equipment, the whole 9 yards. Here's the real story. That's so fucked up. Anyway, so he got hired. He's getting paid. He gives basically a credit card to buy whatever the hell he wants to buy. He buys explicitly what he wants to buy. And then basically all the stuff is coming in. So the stuff is coming in. It takes a couple of months to actually get there. And it's all in these boxes. And it's in beautiful, he has it all staged so he can put in a position and get everything up and running. And then the corporation, for some reason, they needed that particular data server room. So it was a weird facility. It had multiple data center rooms. So they're like, oh, well, we actually need this data center room for something else. So I was like, fuck, this poor guy. He was making a lot of money. He was making a lot of money to put equipment onto dollies, and so he moved it into like a storage area. And they're like, don't worry, we really care about this, right? And so, we're gonna do it, just got delayed a little bit. And so it was like a month later, they're like, okay, so we got the next server room for you. You just gotta scoot it. This guy is like scooting his shit down there. Anyway, so I come to meet him, try to understand what's going on with their disaster recovery scenario. And literally was like, oh, Jesus, Eli. I was like, what? He's like, well, see all this equipment here? I'm like, yeah, okay. So they want me to move this equipment all the way to the server room down the hallway. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars of equipment that they're paying him a lot of money to dolly the hell around this facility. Right? And so that's one of the weird things, like with resources and things too. There's like, what the company gives you, and then what the company actually allows you to use. And again, it gets into this very weird thing when you get into cybersecurity in the real world. So what resources have you been provided for security? This is something you really have to think about. Again, go to your boss, go to whoever's in charge of you, go to whoever's able to write the checks, and ask, what resources do we actually have? You may have a lot of resources. You might be surprised how many resources you have, or you might have no resources. First thing you need to know is how much resources you have. Build security around the resources that you have, not what you wish you had. So when you're going to be building your infrastructure, your apps, whatever else, again, there is this real idea, especially with a lot of young people, I am going to build the best. Right? That's how you know they're a noob. If they say something as stupid as that. I will only build the best. Okay. Go to another company now. Right? Because that's the thing, is you should be building based off of your organization and the resources that they're able to give you, right? If you start building this architecture off of an idea of what they should give you, but they don't give you, that's most likely not going to work out too well. So one of the things to be thinking about is like, what resources do we actually have? Build based off of institutional capabilities, not specific employee skills. Again, this is another big thing in the technology world right now. There's so much technology out there. Again, when I got my MCSE, there were very few options, right? You get your MCSE or you get your Novell server administrator, whatever the hell it was, and you could learn Cisco. That was about it, right? We did not have many options. That's how my generation got in. We all either got MCSE certified or Novell certified. We added on Cisco, and that's what everybody used, right? Hospitals and government and car dealerships. Everybody literally used the exact same hardware. One of the issues you have now in the modern world, though, is there's 1,000 different ways to do things, right? Fireship. I was watching Fireship videos like a year ago, and I about lost my mind when he said, was it the 30 most popular database systems? What? Right? Again, back in the day, it's like MySQL, MS SQL, Oracle. That's what you got. That's it. Right? Now you've got 30 of the most popular. God knows how many database systems actually are out there. So one of the problems you can have, right, when you start designing your security or you're doing updates or anything like that, is be careful that you don't fixate on the skills that a single employee has. Right? If you have 10 employees that understand Python and 1 employee that understands Node.js, build everything off of Python. Because if that Node.js employee leaves, none of your other people are going to know how to maintain that crap, right? And that's one of the issues you run into, again, with this whole idea of best, right? Rust is best. You know, if we're going to be building the security systems, right? We want the fastest and most reliable and the best. We're going to build it on Rust, right? If you have 1 developer out of your company that knows Rust, and you build those systems, the security systems, on Rust, and then they leave, because they're going to leave, because if they know Rust, they're probably worth more than you're paying them. What's going to happen the day after they leave? All right, so think about your institution. Build buy-in with vested interests. And this is a big thing too. Again, I know a lot of tech people, right? You get into tech because you hate people. Well, that sucks. You're going to have to go talk to people now. What? Yeah, right? We're not in the days of Matrix. I remember the days of Neo and Matrix when computer geeks could just go into their little black boxes and nobody ever talked with them. That's not how the world works anymore. It just isn't, right? You need to get buy-in from folks. Again, especially if you're talking about things like resources, right? You need to sell vested interests on the idea of why security is valuable. If you have never run a company, one of the things that you don't understand, may not understand, is that the company only has a certain amount of money, right? You got one pot of money. Some of that money can go to cybersecurity. Some of that money goes to toilet paper. Other money gets divided up, and whatever gets left at the end of the day, the CEO goes to take and buy a yacht, right? One of the things you got to ask yourself is why would the CEO fund your cybersecurity product rather than buy yacht? CEO is like, well, Eli, see, here's the thing. I could buy a yacht, or I could do this cybersecurity thing that I don't understand. I'm going to go buy a yacht. And that puts you all into a bad situation. So you need to go. You need to be friendly with people. You need to office politics. You need to schmooze. No kids' names, no dogs' names, know where they moved to. Hey, how's that new house doing for you? Whatever, right? Ask how the director's kid did at the lacrosse game, and then ask if they saw the news about the data center going up in flames. Hey, boss, hey, yeah, how's it going? How'd your kid do at that lacrosse game? Ah, that's great. I know they were really trying to do that. Hopefully they'll be able to get that scholarship. Yeah. Oh, by the way, did you hear the news today about that data center going up in flames? What do you mean a data center went up in flames? Yeah, there was this data center over in Europe. 30,000 servers. This is true. 30,000 servers went up in flames. Man, blows my mind. Oh, well, we don't have to worry about that, do we? Well, no, our servers aren't in that data center. Whoa. But I mean, if the data center servers are went up in flames, we'd be in the same situation. That's why I've been asking you, can we get a satellite site for a data center so we can do some replication? Let me think about that. Right? And you keep just talking. Ask about the kid. Talk about the disaster. Ask about the kid. Talk about the disaster. See how that works? You lull them. You lull them into complacency, and then drop a bombshell on them. It's how humanity works. What is security? We start talking about security, and this is an important thing now. Again, my area of the world has just gone through a biblical flood, and yeah, yeah, Whew. It's bad. Again, so to understand. So when the flood happened, right, it was 8 o'clock in the morning. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I had Roxy on my lap. I had a hot cup of coffee in my hand. The wind was whipping outside. And I was literally texting with a buddy of mine. And we were trying to figure out where to meet. Because I wanted to talk to him about, again, bringing back the Silicon Dojo classes to Asheville. And that's where I was at when all hell broke loose. Right? The power went off. The water dropped, like water pressure went away. Cell service died, SMS text messaging died, right? It all went boom. And what I found out after I ran into somebody who works for one of the local ISPs is apparently, so our interstates went out. I mean, this was a shit show. Our interstates went out. So we have 4 interstates that come into Asheville, north, south, east, west, basically. And literally, we had the mudslide. We had the mudslide on the eastern one. We had... the roads just fall apart on the western one. Roads going north fell apart, and south, there was an issue there. So like even the interstate, that was, God, it was so bad. It's still bad. Anyways, so I was talking with my buddy. We were at the ISP, and I said, look, I understand the water. I don't like it, but I understand it. The roads, I get the roads. The electricity, I get the electricity. It was a disaster. What I don't understand is the 5G and the cell phones. Why did 5G and cell phone service drop, right? How this architecture is designed, by design, it's not supposed to drop. For a city, we're a city. We've got 100,000 people here, 400,000 people in the metro area. This is a large place. And basically what he said is that the easiest way to bring the fiber lines in was to literally bring them in along the interstates. So when the interstates fell off the sides of mountains, the fiber lines went with them. And so literally at one point, Asheville apparently had one 100 gig pipe heading south for an entire damn city. And again, think about that from a security standpoint and all that kind of thing with your company. What happens if all your fiber lines go bye-bye? Again, whether it's hacker getting in there or that kind of thing, it can be a problem for your company. Make sure nobody's in. So, a lot of people think about Zimbabwean ninja hackers. And so a lot of people ask, why do I say Zimbabwean? Because the Zimbabweans are happy when I talk about them. If I talk about other nationalities hacking us, everybody gets into a tizzy. If I talk about Zimbabweans are like, oh, somebody's talking about us. Yes. So that's why you got to worry about the Zimbabwean ninja hackers. But that's the thing, right? Everybody thinks about cybersecurity. It's like, all the hackers. Dun, dun, dun. All right. It's like Tom Cruise, like coming in through the air vent and doing all that kind of stuff and hacking your system. The reality, that's generally probably not going to be what's damaging and destroying your systems. You are. You are much more dangerous than a Zimbabwean ninja hacker. Dumb employees. Employees doing incredibly dumb crap can take your systems down. Pissed off employees. Employees decide that they don't like your company for whatever reason, and so they intentionally try to hack it. Right? There was that one employee, off in California. He basically changed all of the usernames and passwords on all the networking equipment for the municipality. And then quit. Real stories. Employees, right? Paid off employees. Again, this is a big thing to be thinking about. We're going to talk about war in a little bit. But what happens if a competitor or a nation state slips one of your employees $100,000 to do an oopsie? Right? I had a buddy of mine. And he works for a pretty cool company. Anyways, and he was going through imposter syndrome for a little while there because he fucked up, apparently. Really fucked up. Good coder, did the whole thing, went through the review process. So they were rolling out an update. He created the update, and the update went through the review process. Everybody checked off on it, went out into production, and all hell broke loose. Right? Anyways, my buddy really had an existential issue with this because, he crashed his, company systems. One of the things to be thinking about, right? That is somebody that's trying to do best for the company, that has a vested interest in doing the best for the company, who sends all of his code through the proper review process before it goes into production, and all hell still breaks loose. What happens if one of your competitors slips one of your employees a couple of dollars to put a comma in the wrong place? Right? Something to really consider. And then employees in general. Really, at the end of the day, the two threats against your company are you and employees. Again, if you've never had employees, that may sound harsh. If you've had employees, you know what I'm talking about. Natural disasters. Again, a flood, a hurricane, whatever else happens. How are your systems going to survive that? Hardware failures. So this is an interesting thing, especially in the modern world with equipment running longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. So we actually ran into this back when I had my little tech company. One of the issues that we had is sometimes companies had these servers that would just run for years and years and years and years in the background, and nobody thought about them until they died. Well, the issue is if you have a 12-year-old computer and the motherboard fries itself for whatever reason, God help you finding another motherboard. Have you ever dealt with that problem? Oh, the server died? Okay, so all this stuff is good. Okay, it's just a motherboard fault. Yeah, just go do whatever you have to do. Run the credit card, get a motherboard, get it overnighted. We'll fix it. Yeah, well, I've actually been looking for the past 5 hours, and nobody offers us motherboard anymore. That's just a bad place to be. Something to think about. Vendor failures. Vendors do something stupid. Or again, you get something like a supply chain attack. Again, you saw that with SolarWinds, where they got compromised. All hell broke loose in the latest one, right? Vendor fraud. Overcomplicated security systems. Again, something that I've seen in the real world. You make the security so complicated, nobody can actually use the system, so that doesn't help anybody either. And the other thing to worry about is things like government punishments. Again, things to be thinking about, like when we think about security, right? Think about security overall. Is your company doing something that is going to get it in trouble with government institutions in the future and get them that $5 million fine? Right? You did what the CEO told you to do, and the company got a $5 million fine a couple years from now. Part of your job is to try to mitigate that. At least try to bring it down to $2.5 million, right? Someone yanks the wrong plug, and basically the idea is good security will protect you from both ninja hackers and from floods. Again, when you think about a ransomware attack, so many of these ransomware attacks, what happened? The data became unavailable. That is it. Whether it's a flood, whether it's a tornado, whether it's aliens taking the servers away, or whether it's a ransomware attack, fundamentally all that happened is that data is no longer available. The fact that these organizations cannot make that data accessible again in a reasonable amount of time means that the administrators and the people in charge of those systems basically did gross negligence in 2024. And again, I think those jackasses should go to jail at this point in time. But that is my own soapbox. Let's see here. Again, when you think about things like overcomplicated security, I had a publishing company. Again, we dealt with small businesses. It was two people. Again, I was really excited. We were getting this publishing company as a client. I'm like, wow, we're getting a publishing company. And then I go to their offices, and it was the upstairs of their house, and it was two people, and 3 computers, and a couple of printers. And it's amazing what you can do in the modern world. They were a publishing company. Anyways, so they were having some problems. They were having some problems, and it was pretty obvious that it was like security configuration problems. And so I was like, okay, like what antivirus are you running? What firewalls are you running? Whatever, there's some kind of weird configuration problem here. And then they brought back the 3-ring binder. Again, we're talking about 2 or 3 computers, a couple of printers, and 2 old people. For a printing company. They bring me back this 3-ring binder of all the security that had been set up. That was just a misery. That was just a very bad day, right? And so again, that's one of the things you need to be thinking about when you're putting in cybersecurity or anything like that, is basically what can the institution, what can the organization actually maintain or be expected to maintain when you stop, right? Giving a 3-ring binder of security information to 2 old people and a couple of computers probably isn't helping them out a lot. I also saw this with one of my clients that actually took over from a different managed service provider, where they had ISA server which was a disaster. Microsoft, shockingly, it was an internet, security and acceleration server. Security and acceleration server. Yeah, it made your system secure by making them unusable. This was a fucking disaster. This was misery. Anyways, ran into it a number of times. It was always hell. It was miserable. But the interesting part was, right, so again, the previous company went in, they installed ISO server, everything is secure. But literally, everything was secure to the point that the CEO could not make applications run that he needed to run in order to make the company work. Does that sound like they were doing their jobs? No. Then also things like stupid employee games to be thinking about. Again, we talk about security and again, making sure that systems work properly. One of my viewers was talking about this a couple of years ago. His buddy, in order to have job security, realized that most people can't really grasp arrays past a certain level. Like, you know, a 1-level array, you can follow that. And a 2-level array, you can follow that. And a 3-level array, you can probably follow that. 4-level array, oh, that's going to get a little bit difficult. Basically, with so many configurations and the core design for this Python developer designed, he designed the settings into 9-layer arrays. Literally because he knew most people mentally can't conceive how to think about 9-layer arrays. And that gave him job security. Again, real problems. When we talk about actual events, things that have happened, again, to be thinking about with cybersecurity, again, I know a lot of this may not seem like a lot of programmer stuff, but again, we're kind of going around the programmer thing, but things to be thinking about. Again, when you deploy your apps, you deploy your web app or whatever else, think about the environments you're going to be putting these web apps into. The data center that burned up, literally a data center went poof. Before dawn broke, fire had ripped through the building. Its bright cladding was a misshapen, smoldering shell. The 30,000 servers inside were destroyed, and the adjacent SBG-1 was terminally damaged. Data was lost, and companies across the internet were reeling. At the height of the fire, 3.6 million websites corresponding to 464,000 domain names were unavailable. How would that go if you were in charge of the tech at your company, right? Again, there's a lot of stuff. We put it on the cloud. If we put it on the cloud, it's safe. Now again, I'm a proponent of the cloud. I honestly believe putting it up on the cloud is safer than probably having it in your facility, but it doesn't mean everything might not burn up. Again, think about what would be your scenario for this particular situation. Twitter hacked. Twitter has said the hackers used a phone spear phishing attack to trick Twitter employees to turn over information that gave the hackers access to internal systems. So this was going into the remote work, right? Everybody's going to remote work. But again, one of the things to be thinking about when you decide that your company is going to go in the direction, making sure you come up with documentation, making sure you come up with appropriate processes, and the whole 9 yards. Basically, you had these hackers. Again, it wasn't even Florida man. When Florida man does something, that's bad. When Florida boy does something, you really screw it up. It was like a 17-year-old basically realized you could call up Twitter's help desk and say, hey, I got locked out of systems. And they're like, oh, okay. Again, don't sue me for libel. You can go read. It's about as complicated as that, though. And literally was able to compromise something like 150 high-priority Twitter accounts, got access to those accounts, and then started publishing crap about cryptocurrency. Right? Again, what are the systems that your company has in place? If the director of IT has a brain fart and forgets what their password is, or is changing their password, they fat finger it, seriously, what is the actual process for that person being able to reset their password remotely? Again, this is an important thing to be thinking about in the modern AI world. Again, being able to replicate voices incredibly easily. Again, so even if you know the person, even if the help desk person knows the IT director, oh, I was talking to them on the phone. I know their voice. It was them. No, it wasn't. Asheville fiber lines, again, as I talked about, nearly 70% of Western North Carolina's cell phone towers and equipment were out of service as of September 30th, leaving hundreds of thousands with limited or no cell phone signal according to federal communications data. Almost all of the towers withstood the damaging winds from Hurricane Helene, but fiber optic lines severed primarily by fallen trees caused a widespread catastrophic blackout. And these are the kinds of things to be thinking about when you're building out your cybersecurity. What happens if all your fiber lines go bye-bye? It's all fun and games until it actually happens. The next thing to be thinking about with this is, again, whenever you talk about cybersecurity, especially in the modern world, you get people, they get very serious. The 19-year-old, that 19-year-old, they've seen some stuff. Eli, you gotta understand, we're not going to war, Eli, we're at war. Right? Man, no we're not. Ukraine's at war. We're at whatever we're at. But one of the big things to be thinking about, again, the cybersecurity world right now, is this whole idea that we're at war. There's nothing more funny than seeing somebody very seriously tell you we're at war when they're like 300 pounds. Like, oh, we're at war? Great, so I'm sure you could run 5 miles, drop to the ground, and lay cover in fire, right? What does that have to do with anything? Oh, nothing. War. Anyway. But anyways, you get a lot of people out there. They're saying we're already at war. But one of the things I want you to consider, what if this is true? Right, again, the 19-year-olds. The 19-year-olds get to say stupid crap because they do not expect anybody to actually listen to them. What if you start to be the director? What if you start to be a decision maker? And what if you actually believe, we are at, Eli, this is war. Not only it will be war, but we are at war. Something to consider then is, are you on a war footing? Are you flapping your gums to sound impressive because the thought of running 5 miles gives you a heart attack? Or is this something you've really thought through and you're trying to design your systems in a scenario where we might not go to war, but we are actually in war? It's an important thing to be thinking about. Again, when we start talking about nation-state actors, NSA, a few years ago, 15 years ago at this point, spent $8 billion. $8 billion just to build a data center. So there's a data center down in Nevada or whatever else, and they built their data center to store all of the information they completely legally collect. Anyways, think about that. They spent $8 billion just to build that data center. Not even to populate it with data or run it for a year. So one of the things to be thinking about is, again, when you're building your systems, when you're designing the apps, whatever your app plans to be, and you think we're actually at war, are you designing your infrastructure based off of that? Now, a real eye-opening experience. I interviewed the CEO of Spiceworks years ago. Now, to be clear, FTC compliance, Spiceworks was one of my best sponsors. They paid me a lot of money back in the day. But anyways, this video is still on YouTube, so I can talk about it. And Spiceworks, if you don't know, was very useful, again, especially for my generation of tech professionals, because it gave you free network mapping software, right? So when you're going to go out there and you're going to audit your network, you're going to map to, basically know what equipment is on your network, so know the IP address of the equipment, know what the equipment basically is, know what ports are available on the equipment, and a whole bunch of other stuff. That's basically what Spiceworks did. SolarWinds, back in the day, basically did the same type of stuff. Frankly, better, but whatever. But it costs $50 per agent, right? So if I'm an MSP, if I'm running my small company, I've got 50 or 100 computers, I can either spend $50 per agent to run my equipment so that I can do mapping and all that kind of stuff, or I can use Spiceworks for free. And I sat down with the CEO of Spiceworks, Scott Abel, and basically their idea at the time was that the cost of software was going to go to zero. Right? Basically, if you looked at where the cost of software was going, it was going to go to zero. And so they were actually trying to create IT support software that could basically be paid for off of ad revenue. So you were doing your network mapping and you got a banner ad for Cisco or something like that on the side. Again, it's really interesting. But the important thing to understand about this is that it's network mapping software that is generally being installed under administrator accounts in thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses. Right? I'm not talking about fucking Flappy Bird here. I'm talking about equipment literally designed for network discovery and mapping and the whole nine yards. And the interesting thing is you can watch this video from like 2014, and at a certain point during the video I look at Scott and I'm like, yeah, so what are your counterintelligence capabilities? And then he just gave me the look. He just gave me the look. Some people go, that's one of your questions you have. Like, no, seriously, what are your counterintelligence capabilities? Because again, if you are a country like China or Zimbabwe, sorry, let's not use any of the wrong countries out there. If you're a country like Zimbabwe or Namibia, right, you might really like to be able to collect a metric crap ton of information about people's systems. And hey, if the software happens to be installed under administrator accounts, can take that too. But the fascinating thing there is when I talked with him, he really seemed like, And so that's one of the things to be considering. Again, if you think we're at war scenario, again, China or whatever, whoever else, what capabilities do you have to even know if your systems have been compromised? Again, I came from the military world, right? I was a kid of the 70s and the 80s. And so back in the day with espionage, right? The Zimbabwean hacker, who would they go after? They would go after the CIA. They would go after the Defense Department. They would go after the big government organizations. It was really cool hardware back then. Anyways, why? Because they had the high-tech information. They had the data, they had the high-tech information, the whole nine yards. If you think about it in the modern world, if you're a nation state and you're thinking about who you're going to hack, who is actually more valuable? What is going to give you the better ROI? Trying to go after the DoD or trying to go after the parts vendors for the F-35 program? What's actually going to give you an ROI? And then think about that. The DoD has whatever security they have. A vendor from the F-35 program might, have like 15 employees and, Geek Squad. Something to consider. And again, when we think about this, again, at war. Saudi spy at Twitter. A former Twitter employee found guilty of spying on users on behalf of the Saudi royal family has been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Ahmed, a dual US-Lebanese citizen who helped oversee media partnerships for Twitter in the Middle East and North Africa, was part of the scheme to acquire the personal information of users, including phone numbers and birth dates, for a Saudi government agent. And again, do remember, the Saudis have a nasty habit of killing the people that they don't like. This is actually a Twitter employee, right? China installs viruses on hard drives. Following findings by the Investigation Bureau that portable hard disks produced by U.S. disk drive manufacturer Seagate Technology that were sold in Taiwan contained Trojan horse viruses, further investigation suggested that the contamination took place when products were in the hands of Chinese subcontractors during the manufacturing process. So this was an interesting thing. So back when large hard drives, again 500 gig hard drives became the thing, China started putting viruses on brand new hard drives. And the idea being is that most people don't need big hard drives. And so most of the people that are buying 500 gig or 1 terabyte drives back in the day were governments or large organizations, that type of thing. So if they could put the virus on the hard drive before it left the factory, you could go all the way from the factory straight into your server in a hot swappable bay, and, Bob's your uncle. Real thing. NSA, again, just so we're not beating up on one particular country. NSA compromises hardware en route. A document including the trove of NSA files released with Glenn Greenwald's book, No Place to Hide, details how the agency's tailored access operations unit and other NSA employees intercept servers, routers, and other network gear being shipped to organizations targeted for surveillance and install covert implant firmware onto them before they're delivered. So NSA went, well, hard drives, anybody can slap a virus onto a hard drive. They're actually going to open up the Cisco equipment en route, put crap into it, wrap it all back up, and allow you to put into your rack, and you have no idea what is occurring. Beyond that, you've got the hacktivist. So this is good, again, especially for the programmers. Hacktivist nukes Russian servers with Python module. This was beautiful. The Node IPC author pushed a new version of the library that sabotaged computers in Russia and Belarus, the countries invading Ukraine, and providing support for the invasion, respectively. The new release added a function that checked the IP address of developers who use the Node IPC in their own projects. When an IP address is geolocated to either Russia or Belarus, the new version wiped files from the machine and replaced them with a heart emoji. Oh, you gotta love those hacktivists. So literally, this was simply a module by hacktivists who didn't like what Russia was doing and basically put this in there. If you geolocated basically your IP into Russia or Belarus, your server gets wiped. Now, all of these situations, is your organization or are you confident that you can stop any of this? Again, things to be thinking about. Again, we're talking about cybersecurity and war footing. Target acquisition. Again, this is one of the most interesting things to be thinking about. Do you realize how much crap people post on LinkedIn? This is bizarre, right? If you post the wrong word on Facebook, you can get fired, right? If you upload the wrong meme to Twitter, your career is over. On the other hand, if you publish literally everything that you do for your current company, that is there for everybody to see and nobody has a problem with it. One of the things to be thinking about, again, with intelligence operations, people are thinking about coming after your particular company. Can they go to LinkedIn? Can they pull up your company? Can they pull up the tech employees for your company? And can they basically map out all the technologies that you use? Does that seem smart if you believe that we're on a war footing? Offsite security. Do you audit security of remote workers' environments? Again, this is a big thing now. Again, with everybody going remote, things to be thinking about. If the local environment for one of your employees gets compromised, would you know? Again, the NSA or whatever else. If the router in their home is compromised, would you know? Could somebody install a man-in-the-middle attack within a home environment, and would that be detected? Do you have any systems in place to be able to detect that type of thing? Personal investigations. If your junior admin buys a multi-million-dollar house in the Bahamas, would you know? Again, this is a big thing, right? That was one of the big things in the government, military, right? They always look. If you're a PFC and you buy $1 million house, you're going to get a damn knock on the door. They're going to ask why. Something to think about with your company. Right, you have a startup company. Again, imagine you have Spiceworks. You have a junior level admin, and the junior level admin drives to work one morning in a brand new Maserati. Again, think about processes. Have you created a process so that anybody in the company, anybody at all, I'm not saying everybody, but somebody in that company ask that junior level admin just a couple of questions to understand where that new Maserati came from? Or is it just like, yeah, well, obviously he needs a Maserati. Did you see he bought a $10 million house last month, so obviously he needs a Maserati to go with it. Yeah, but he makes $125 a year. It doesn't pay for those things. Can somebody ask? Vendor trust. Have you ever visited your vendor's facilities, or at least to do a sniff test? Again, this used to be a bigger thing with the cloud. Back when I started Everyman IT, we put our servers into a co-location facility. So I actually knew my facility. I went to the facility. I knew the NOC, the people in the NOC. I knew how it was built. I understood the fiber connections. I understood all that, and so I had a certain level of comfort around that. When you deploy your code to the cloud, are you deploying it to a facility where you feel comfortable with the employees, that you understand where it's physically located and feel pretty comfortable with the threat environment over that? You've seen how everything's designed, the physical security and all that, and you feel pretty comfortable, right? Is that how you feel about where your systems in the cloud are deployed? Or did you just swipe a credit card and upload it to somewhere and, it's in the cloud? Counterintelligence. Do you know why or if your organization is considered a valuable target? Again, you're going out there, you create the next Flappy Bird or whatever else. Is there a reason that Zimbabwe would care? Like, oh, this company, they're at the forefront of bird flapping technology, right? Something to consider, because again, a lot of folks out there they don't think about it. Like, oh, I'm gonna create the social app. I'm gonna create this social app for geeks in the government. Why would any nation state actor care about my company? I mean, all we do is collect extensive information about geeks in the government. They wouldn't find that valuable, right? Something to consider. And target hardening. Things like who can update systems and what is the validation process for updates. Again, think about that Python module. That Python module went out and it wiped a lot of servers. And again, it wiped servers of NGOs in Russia. Right? It wiped servers of other people in Russia. It wiped servers if they just thought it was in Russia. So one of the things to be thinking about is when you do update the systems and all that kind of thing, who is actually responsible for that? And audit, and audit your systems. You can't fix problems you don't bother to find. Again, that's the other big thing to be thinking about with a lot of these large systems is you go out there, you initially build them, then you start duct taping crap onto them. One person feels pretty safe about how all of your systems have been built. It's now 5 or 10 years later. When was the last time somebody just went in and started auditing your systems? What does this do? Why do we have this account? Why does this app ping this other app over there? That's one of the things I used to do. Again, back when I had my little tech company, a lot of the time, part of my job was literally to rip out equipment that simply wasn't even being used anymore. It's not like I was migrating. It's not like we migrated up and then we ripped it out. Many times I would walk into server rooms and I'd be like, what do these servers do? They'd say, I have no idea. And I'd spend a couple of days, okay, what does this server do? Okay, nothing. Then I turn it off, make sure nothing fails. Okay, that goes in the recycling bin. Right? Disaster recovery. So this is going to be a big thing to be thinking about when you start developing your systems. Because again, a lot of people think about backups. They don't think about disaster recovery. Safe data is not the same as usable data. Right? Because that's one of the big things. Like, okay, we're making sure that our data is backed up. Basically, all the data backup means is that you take your data, you put it into a format that's supposed to be stable. Hopefully you don't have bit rot. It's supposed to be stable. It's supposed to be portable. You now have that data. And then if something happens, you can put that data back onto other servers. One of the big issues that you run into, though, in the modern world is how long recovery takes if you do simple backup solutions. So we ran into this, again, back when I had my company. So we went from 40 gig hard drives to 80 gig hard drives, 200 gig hard drives, 500 gig hard drives to terabyte drives. One of the issues that we ran into is that when we were doing recoveries and backups on 20 gig drives, who the hell cared? Took like an hour. Nobody gave a damn. Got up to 100 gig drives, still pretty quick. The issue that you start running into is when you start having to recover from terabytes of data, that crap just takes a long time. Even if you have the hardware, even if you have everything set up, even if all you have to do is take the backup file and put it into the server to get it up and running. Once you start talking about terabytes of storage, it can just take a damn long time to get that crap online. And one of the things you have to be thinking about your company, again, especially in this modern world, is how much money is your company losing for every hour, every day that they're down, right? If it's going to take you 2 days to recover however many terabytes onto the server to make it functional, right? If your company has 20 full-time employees that are no longer able to do their job, that may be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that are losing. Simply the data isn't lost, but simply the downtime is. So one of the things you need to be thinking about is the concept of disaster recovery versus something like basically like a backup. Basically the idea is with disaster recoveries is that the way that you back up your systems is basically you make your systems redundant so that if your systems fail for whatever reason, you're either able to spin them up somewhere else or there's a high availability failover. You have some kind of failover regime. So basically when one set of servers or whatever goes down, they fail. It fails over to your other set of servers and they're up and running. So this may be through things like replication systems. So again, if you're using databases, whatever database systems that you have that it's replicating. So if a cluster goes down, it simply goes over to the other clusters that you have. Replication systems, Veeam actually has a pretty cool system where you can actually back up your virtual servers. So basically your virtual servers are backed up as an instance. That instance can actually go up to a disaster recovery third-party provider, and God help you if you have to spin up your systems there, but basically they're in a usable format. So if a flood comes through and takes out all of your servers, you can literally spin up the instances on their infrastructure. Your systems just keep chugging along. The users, they don't see any difference because everything is now running there. You're just getting charged an arm and a leg for it to be up there until you can get your systems back up and running in your own physical environment. Let's see here. The other thing to be thinking about is things like hybrid architectures, multi-cloud or public-private cloud. Hybrid. Again, we talk about things like cloud, but again, think about things like architecture. So what happens? What happens if 10 of your servers are in the 30,000 that just burned up? Don't worry, we have our servers in the cloud. Okay, yeah, but what if that cloud burns up? Do you have a failover? Again, you may be using AWS for a lot of things. AWS, Azure, Linode, DigitalOcean, something like that. Do you have some kind of replication strategy? Can your DigitalOcean replicate to Linode? Or can your DigitalOcean replicate to a local server so you can keep things up and running if something happens to DigitalOcean? What happens if one of those components fails? And have you built some kind of system for that? This is an important thing with AWS. Like again, there's a weird thing with AWS administrators where AWS specifically tells you things, and then people ignore the things that AWS tells you, and then they get mad when it happens. So one of the things that AWS tells you is that if your data is valuable, if high availability is important to you, that you need to spread your infrastructure over multiple regions. So with AWS, I forget how many regions they have in the United States, but they have multiple regions, right? So there's like the Northeast, and there's the West. I don't know, they got like 5 or 6 different regions. Because here's the thing, every once in a while, an AWS region just drops. It just drops. Why? Who knows? Anyways, so the thing is, if you have your infrastructure over multiple AWS regions, basically if one region drops, everything's basically fail over to that other region. Your users still get access to the data, the whole 9 yards. Nobody knows there's any problem, and then the first region comes back up, and everybody's fine. The thing is with that, again, we talk about resources, we talk about money. Obviously, it costs money costs more money to host in multiple regions than it does in a single region. But that's one of the things to be considering is like even with AWS, even if you're going to stay in AWS, you're not going to do multi-cloud, you're not going to do hybrid, you're just going to stay in AWS. Just thinking about how you're designing that architecture for when AWS has the hiccups that even AWS will tell you that they're going to have. Let's see here. Physical and operational security and surveillance. Good security keeps well-intentioned employees from doing something stupid. Yeah, you'll notice this word keeps coming up. There's a reason for that. Anyways, one of the big things with things like physical and operational security is a lot of times employees are either going to do the stupid thing or they're going to help somebody else do the stupid thing. So things with operational security and locks and surveillance, this helps try to mitigate the stupidity. Physical security is physically preventing people from accessing hardware, right? Doors, locks, fences, server racks, server or device boxes. So one of the big things that you're going to run into in the real world with things like resources is you know that you need to physically secure your equipment, right? There should be a server room, right? If you have a company, if you have a building, you should have a server room. You should have some kind of data center. One of the issues that you get to sometimes is sometimes companies just don't have the space for it. I think about this with one of the first managers I had to deal with in Pittsburgh. So I was young, I knew my security. Anyway, so I walk into our Pittsburgh office, I take a look around, and we had our server room. So we had a server room, had like $150,000 of equipment in the server room, along with a mop bucket. Right? The mop bucket and the chlorine bleach and the ammonia and all that crap. It's like 150 grand here, a mop bucket here. Anyways, so one of the things I went to the manager, being a good technology professional I was, this is not acceptable. And the manager just kind of kicked back and looked at me. I was like, Eli, I completely agree with you. I was like, wow, that was easy. That was easy. You just come in and you look these managers in the eye and you tell them what's what, and they'll capitulate. They said, here's the thing, Eli, here's the thing. I've been managing this office for 3 years now. Okay. And he's like, and I have not found another utility closet. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, Eli, so I completely agree with you. So you just find me the other utility closet in this building, and I will get that mop bucket out of there today. Right? Again, in the room. So one of the things to be thinking about, again, when you're dealing with your company, you may not be able to have a server room. You may not be able to have a server room. Maybe you can have a fence. Maybe you can have a fence that separates, the mops from your servers. Maybe. If you don't have like a lot of equipment, again, there's a lot of cool, these server boxes. They started making those some odd years ago. These server boxes are really nice, right? So you got a little, your web server or whatever else, you shove it in the metal box, you lock it up, you bolt it to the wall. It's very hard to get off the wall. Basically, that keeps people from being able to mess with it in the whole 9 yards. Hopefully, if a thief comes in, they're not able to get a damn thing off the wall. So one of the things to be thinking about with physical security is, what can you do? Like so many times, there's the idea of best. This is the best way to do things. And you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. So a lot of people do, well, if you can't get the best, right? And I'm like, well, okay, well, you can't get the best. Maybe there's a step down somewhere in there, something that you can actually accomplish. Operational security is a huge one. Prevent unauthorized people from understanding how your organization and infrastructure works. Again, imagine if you're the target of a nation-state actor. Imagine you're the target of, I don't know, Big Bear, whatever the hell. Do they understand how your organization and your infrastructure works? That's going to be the first thing, right? So if somebody's going to try to compromise your systems, right? They're actually looking to maliciously compromise your systems, either from the internet, from Zimbabwe, or actually come into your facility. The more they understand how your systems work, the easier it's going to be. Again, I go back to that whole LinkedIn thing. If I can go to your company's LinkedIn page, I can pull up your tech employees, and I can literally see the technology that they're currently supporting, then I have an idea of the vectors to try to attack, right? If I know the products, right? You've worked for this company for 3 years, you just got certified in this particular product. The reality is, in the real world, you only get certified for the products that your company actually wants. You probably have that product. Okay, now I know what to try to go after. And so with operational security, one of the things that you're trying to do is you're trying to make it as hard as possible for people to try to figure out what's going on with the infrastructure of your company. Again, my whole argument, again, being an old admin, put a restroom out of order sign on the server room door that's locked. Right? Somebody tries to come into your building. Again, I did a lot of my work in Baltimore, worrying about crackheads stealing your servers was a thing. Right? Are they gonna try to break in to an out of order toilet? That seems like a lot of work and effort. They might get caught by the cops by. They'll go and try to grab some other stuff. Again, it's kind of operational security. Screwing with people says, do they understand what's going on? Do you have all your doors marked? Every door in your facility is marked with exactly what the hell it is. Why? Why? Don't. If you work for the company, you should know what those things are. If you don't work for the company, bugger the hell off. Right? This comes to a real story again with PBX cards back in the day. So PBXs were the old telephone systems. I was an administrator of analog and digital. They're called VIA Definity systems. You know what those things are. Anyways, so those were like big enterprise type systems. So my company used like the smaller grade, but for the smaller grade, they're still like $50,000-$60,000 boxes, and basically they're just the telephone systems, right? Telephone systems for the company. The thing was, all the functionality for those telephone systems came from these cards. They're these like the really freaking big look like PCI cards, right? And basically you slotted those into your Definity system, and that gave you the auto attendant, that gave you more lines, that gave you all the functionality, right? Well, each one of those cards was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, right? Each card is like $3,000 to $5,000, and one PBX literally might have 10 of those damn cards in it. So one of the things some criminals realized is, hey, those cards are really expensive. And you know what? If you walk up to the receptionist of a building with a little technician uniform on and say, hi, I'm with the telephone administration company and we have a report that there's a problem. Can you show me to your telephone room? It's amazing how the receptionist, oh yeah, sure. And would take the people to the telephone room, would let them in, and be like, just let me know if you need anything. They would go back to their desk. Basically, the thieves would go in, they'd open up the PBX, they would just start ripping out the cards, putting them into the bag. They would then close it up, they'd walk out to the receptionist, and the receptionist, oh, I know you're working on it, but people are having problems with the telephones. Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, there is. There's a couple problems with telephones right now. That's why we got called in. I need to go call my boss to make sure what we do next. So I'll just be back in like 5 or 10 minutes. And then they walk out with tens of thousands of dollars in cards and go bye-bye. And then the owner of the company says, why the hell are the telephone systems down? And the receptionist says, oh, because the telco people are working on it. And the boss says, what the fuck are you talking about? And it ends in tears. Here's one of the things I think about operational security and physical security. If the receptionist doesn't know where your telephone system is, and if the telephone system is behind a locked door, that scenario cannot occur. Right? And again, it's things to be thinking about. Again, like I say, with that Twitter, right? With people, calling Twitter, the Florida boy doing targeted spear phishing attacks, and then calling Twitter to find out how their infrastructure worked. Beautiful. A fucking 17-year-old hacked Twitter with using spear phishing attacks and calling them. Right? There's a problem there. Again, a lot of times, people are trying to be helpful. They're trying to do good, and that's what nefarious people will work on. And then there's surveillance. One of the things you have to be worried about with surveillance is surveillance isn't security. People think surveillance is security. Again, whether it's cameras, that I talk about here, or it's log files. Oh yeah, we've got security. We have surveillance. All surveillance does is basically give you documentation that a nefarious act happened. That's not security. A door is security. A fence is security. A firewall, an antivirus system is a security. A log file and or a surveillance camera is just surveillance. It's just showing you what's occurring. One of the things to be thinking about with any kind of this surveillance is anyone watching the cameras or the log files? Will you have beautiful documentation on how your startup was destroyed? Oh, don't worry, boss. Don't worry. I know you're gonna go bankrupt, and you personally signed for the lease and all that. But it's okay. Look, I've got a gigabit of log files showing how the Zimbabweans stole all of our data. Yes. If an attack is occurring, is there anybody there to actually see it? Again, modern world of AI. Do any systems trigger? If the person watching the camera sees an incident or the log file, do they know what to do next? Again, this goes back to the whole things like procedures. Again, you talk with a lot of technology professionals, they hate this idea, documentation, procedures, the whole nine yards. But again, if you see something going on with the log files, who do you talk to that can actually do something about it? Do you have that? And the other thing, too, to think about with things like deterrence is, again, the interesting idea with hidden cameras. If you put up hidden cameras, or if you put up hidden surveillance systems, they can't act as deterrents. Nobody is going to be afraid of the camera that they don't know exists. So that's one of the things to be thinking about too, with like cameras and all that kind of thing. Again, and this is where we go through that whole planning and documentation and procedures. If you put up some kind of surveillance system, is there a reason that you want to be hidden? Or do you want it to be big and bold and flashy so that people know that it's there? Again, there's that whole thing. Somebody may not have burglarized your business if they had known they were on camera. But they didn't know they were on camera, so they burglarized your business. Right? Again, things like with log files. All right? If you pop up something on the screen that says, hey, it seems like what you're doing is illicit, that might get somebody to back off. Oh, where are we at? We are at 3:38. And we still got a bit to go. Anyways, now we'll get into some more techie stuff. More of the coding stuff. So API security. So this is a big one. Again, in the modern world, we start talking about programming. One of the big things is something called service-oriented architecture. Again, so we talk about architectural styles. There was mainframe, application server architecture. There's a client-server architecture. There's service-oriented architecture. There's microservices architecture. Basically, it's how all this stuff is designed and built. And one of the big things now is service-oriented architecture. The idea is everything should be a service, not a server. And so you are going to be connecting to a lot of different services in order to provide the finished product that you're offering to your customers. So one of the things you need to be thinking about is, again, what is your API security stance? When you think about API security, what do you think about that? Have you thought about that? Or do you just swipe a credit card? Vendor trust. Do you trust the vendor? So again, one of the things to be thinking about when you're using API calls, right? So if I'm doing a geolocation API, so one of the things we use a lot in the classes is geolocation API. So we send an IP address to the API provider, and they return information in their database, right? The supposed lat long of the place, the ISP, the city, the state, the country that IP address is in, the whole 9 yards, right? So one of the things you might not be thinking about with that is there's actually a lot of information that can be retained from that. They know what company is making the API call. So they know you are making the API call. And then when that information goes into their systems, you don't really know what happens next, right? We want to think that you make the API call, you plug something in, it processes, it gives you a JSON response, and that's it. Remember, they can log all that information. So again, you think about correlating data. If they have information about your company, so they know who you are as a company, they know what your company does, they get some demographic information about who your company provides services for. And now you're sending IP addresses of the users in order to pull back this geodata. Think about that. They can correlate then those IP addresses with your company and try to start understanding how people are using your company and using your systems and that type of thing. Again, if you're talking about something like a nation-state actor, what if an API is being run by Saudi Arabia? They want to crack down on people saying things about their king or whatnot, right? And so let's say you're doing these API calls, and let's say it's WikiLeaks, something like WikiLeaks or whatever else, right? And so basically they just take that information. Okay, this is a WikiLeaks type thing. You're trying to get the geographic information where your users are coming from, and so what if somebody is in their systems and collecting that information? Okay, this IP address went to WikiLeaks, and this correlates to this geographic location. This IP address went to, this IP address went to, this IP address went to. Here is now a list of all the IP addresses that went to this WikiLeaks type company, and now we're going to put that into our system, and then we're going to correlate that against other data that we know, and oh look, right? I don't know, this person used to work for USAID 15 years ago, and they're going to WikiLeaks now. Let's go have the police go after them. Right? Something to consider. Also, again, with things like how does that information get used? Again, from a competitive standpoint, who else can access that type of information to understand how well your company is doing? If you have a new startup company, you're telling the world that you're taking off, and your API calls don't necessarily show that. Who can know that particular information? What happens to your data? Again, and is the metadata important? Again, the fact that these queries are coming from your company, you're asking for this specific type of information, can something be sussed out from that type of thing? Key rotation, so with APIs. This is one of the big things. So basically keys are essentially your passwords. They're your security system that are going to get you into being able to use the API. One of the things that I look at is what is your key rotation situation? Are you able to rotate your keys relatively easily? Again, this is going to be a big thing when you go from a development environment to a production environment, right? Development environment, you just plug the key somewhere, it works, you're fine. Again, one of the things to be thinking about is, okay, well, what happens when you're running this 24 hours a day, 7 days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Basically, it's being hit all the time. How do you rotate those keys through? How do you make sure nobody gains access to the keys and that they're not using them? Again, you think about things like with OpenAI or whatever. Again, OpenAI costs a fifth of a penny, so it's a fifth of a penny for 750 words, basically 1,000 tokens. Doesn't seem like a lot. If somebody's able to access your API key and they plug it into their system, they're now running, basically running their services off of your API key. And how easy, would it be to rack up a $5,000 bill on some large corporation system and they don't even realize that that's occurred? One of the things to be thinking about is if you have that key rotation, again, it's just like password changing systems. Every X amount of time, you rotate that key. So if the key did get compromised some way, hopefully this mitigates that particular issue. The other thing to be looking at when you're using these APIs is basically how easy it is to rotate the API keys. One of the things I found weird, again, trying to do these classes and trying to find services for you folks to play around with, is how horrible the key rotation strategy can be with some of these APIs. It can suck. It can suck. Again, if you look at OpenAI, I do have to say OpenAI, their key management system is actually pretty good. You can put specific permissions on what particular keys do. You can tag keys for specific projects. Makes it a pretty good system. But you see with some of these keys, it is brutal. Just simply trying to get a new API key from some of these vendors can really not be a fun time. So that's one of the things to be thinking about. Again, from a security standpoint, when you're going to choose which vendor you're going with, thinking about which vendor has the easiest, key rotation strategy. This one costs us, an extra penny per 1,000 requests, but I can rotate the keys relatively easily. Something to consider. Don't upload your keys. So environment variables, we're going to go over this in another class coming up. But when you're using GitHub, again, if you're doing your coding projects, do make sure to upload to GitHub so all the recruiters know that you're actually doing work. That is important. But when you do make sure you do not upload your API keys to GitHub. Because then bad things will happen. That's the other thing to be thinking about too, is with, again, proprietary information or data, stuff that gets uploaded to GitHub, making sure what you should or should not upload to GitHub is an important thing. Again, you think about things like trying to survey a network or survey an infrastructure. If you start uploading your particular little scripts on how you're trying to better manage your infrastructure, and those are public repositories, that might be a problem coming down the pike. Let's see here, cache responses. So I don't see why more people don't do this. So basically what a cache is basically when you make a request and you get the response back, you basically save both the request and the response into a local or a database that you own, and then you keep those. And so in the future, instead of going out and doing the API call, you simply go to your local cache, because it's there. It doesn't cost you any more money. It doesn't cost you, a fifth of a penny for 750 words. You just go to your own local database. Basically, it allows for responses to be a hell of a lot faster. The first request has to go through the API. It's pretty slow. The next request goes through your own local database. So it's a lot, again, going to be a lot faster for the return. And the other thing to be thinking about too is with your API vendor, if they are, logging the type of data that you're asking for, they only get to log that once, right? So instead of knowing that this one thing got requested 1,000 times a day, they know that one thing got requested 5 days ago and that's it, right? You limit the amount of data that's going out of your system that can actually be surveilled. Vendor shutdown. What happens if your vendor goes offline? So this is a big thing with a lot of startup companies now, is they're startup companies, they're going to go to the moon, they're going to go to Mars, and then they blow up. One of the things to be considering, from your standpoint, when you're building out your stuff is, how secure do you feel in that vendor, going into the future? Again, Twilio, right? Twilio might be a little bit more expensive than another SMS vendor, but you're probably pretty secure that Twilio is going to be around a year or 2 years from now, or at least until you're gone from the company, right? One of those things to consider. One of the things to be thinking about too is, can you use other API vendors to test that everything is working properly before everything goes to hell? Something to consider. So architecture for security. Ooh, we got some stuff. We're gonna go through. Any questions up until this point in time? No questions. Okay. Oh, let's see here. Architecture for security, things to be thinking about. The first thing to think about is beware of shadow IT. Shadow IT is where the marketing department asks you, the manager for the marketing department asks for a particular service from you, and you say no because you can say no. And so they swipe the credit card and they buy it from somebody else. And then everything goes to hell, right? Again, whenever you think about your infrastructure and all that, you want to keep that under the control of the tech department. You want to keep that under the control of the geeks for any number of reasons. One, for things like security, disaster recovery, that type of thing. For support, right? If the marketing department calls, since indeed needs help on some product and you didn't even know the company was using that product, that's harder to support for. Integrations, a whole bunch of other things. Also for things like regulatory compliance, especially if you're dealing with publicly traded companies. There's a lot of communication data that is supposed to be stored for a certain amount of time. Right? You set up on Google services or Office 365, you have the archiving feature, you're doing everything per regulations. If one of the departments basically swipes a credit card in order to use some type of different communication system, all of a sudden that is now outside of your sphere, and God knows what's going on with that. The other big problem too is, again, imagine you have the super marketing person. A super marketing person comes in, they revolutionize your marketing department, you're making more money than ever, and one of the things that they do is they have the marketing department start using specific services. I found that this AI platform does the best for this, and I found this CRM does the best for this, and I found, right? Well, if you keep that within the company, then the company credit card is being swiped, and so it's a company account for this AI solution, and it's a company account for this CRM solution, and it's a company account for this communication solution. Here's the thing: if that marketing director, that hotshot marketing director, is swiping their own credit card because it's easier, look, right? I'm gonna if I hit my numbers, I'm gonna get a $15,000 or $20,000 bonus this quarter, and this service costs $20 a month, right? Right, that's easy. I'm just going to swipe the credit. I'm going to spend $20 to get $20,000. The problem is, what happens when that marketing person gets poached by another company? And so not only do they leave, but they also take their credit card with them, which basically means they're taking all the accounts with them. And now not only have you lost your marketing person, but all that infrastructure that got set up that somebody could theoretically have taken over also walks out the door with them. That can be holy hell. So it's going to be one of those things that you're going to have to be careful about. Get buy-in from users so that they use the proper systems. Again, this is where we talk about that human factor, that communication factor. Talking with your users, talking with your managers about why they need to use the systems or the solutions that you've developed. It's a big thing. I know this is a big issue in the tech world right now. So I've talked with coders. And this is going to come as a shock. I know, and there's probably a couple coders that are actually watching. And what I'm going to tell you is going to be like, what? No. So there are a lot of companies out there that do not allow their coders to use a Copilot, right? So VS Code, right? You can use OpenAI or whatever it is. It's the Copilot, the coding Copilot thing, right? It costs $20 a month. And so basically, a lot of these companies are like, no. We don't want you to use Copilot, so we're not paying for Copilot. But they don't want them to use Copilot. The very important thing is, right? Because they're concerned, again, from an intellectual property standpoint, from a security standpoint, from a regulatory compliance standpoint, there are actual concerns about whether or not you should use Copilot. It's a discussion for a different day, but there is some argument there. Well, here's the problem. If your coders are sitting on their computer and they're like, well, I know I was told I'm not supposed to use Copilot, but shink, I make $250,000 a year. Copilot costs $20 a month and saves me a lot of time. What are you going to do? They're going to use Copilot. So that's one of the things to be talking with your people is basically figure out where the system breaks. Figure out how far you can argue with people, with your users, until they start being insubordinate, and then try to figure out where the solution might be. Can you come to the middle? And also understand user problems and try to make your systems work so they don't want to bypass them. Again, with VS Code, one of the things I want to work on in one of our classes is you can actually use VS Code with OLAMA, apparently. Right? So if your company is worried about regulatory compliance and a whole bunch of other things with using Copilot with OpenAI, maybe the executives would be more comfortable if the Copilot functionality could just ping off of OLAMA. So instead of saying you can't use Copilot, one of the things you can say, okay, I see how valuable this is. We have the OLAMA solution. So can we all play nice for a little bit? Things to consider. Layered security. Whenever you do use security, security should be created in layers with the eye towards if one layer fails, the systems will still be secure. If someone has the admin username and password, but port 22 is blocked, the server remains secure. So this is a big thing to be thinking about with your security is, again, what we talked about before. Right? You got your little box here. And then one of the things that we need in order for attack is the vulnerability. Right, the vulnerability. Port 22 is wide open, and maybe somebody has a username and somebody has a password. Right? So if all the security you have is this, and somebody might be able to get in and access that. But again, if you have firewalls, right? So let's say this is your database cluster. Right? Let's say your database cluster. So basically what you do is you put this cluster and you put it on its own subnet. So 192.168, .5.x subnet. So that's where all your database servers are going to be. So the only way to directly access one of the database servers is to actually be somewhere on the same subnet as a cluster, and you don't have any way for that to happen. So again, you connect this with a router. So you have a router, and this connects back to the main network. Off the main network, right, you might have your web servers over here, you might have, VPN services over here, the whole 9 yards. So, even if port 22 is open, somebody can't just get here, so they're not able to access it. If somebody gets in through the VPN, right, if you have this routing configuration and everything set up, and you've basically blocked port 22 from anybody in the outside world, even if they try to get in, it is still not going to happen, right? This is the idea of adding multiple layers to your infrastructure so that even if one of them is compromised, everything does not go to hell. Again, think about that with a spear phishing attack, right? So, say Florida boy, spearfishes the CEO of Twitter, and he clicks on it because he thinks it's going to be a dank meme. Well, here's the thing, right? So the spear phishing attack worked. Right, the techno king clicked on the malicious, attachment that was sent so that they could see the dank meme. If they are not an administrator on the computer, if they're on a locked down user account on that particular system, even if they click on that, so you have multiple failures that allowed that to happen, but even if they click, they're not actually going to be able to execute the code and install anything because the account that's running on that system does not have permission to actually do whatever that virus is trying to accomplish. And so that's one of the things you need to be thinking about, again, with that whole idea of the layered security. No root, again, with that, no root for standard usage. Malware viruses can perform tasks based on the user's level of access. If the target of a phishing attack can't add a printer, then the attack will probably fail. Again, especially if you're using the Microsoft world, again, with the group policies, right? Group policies, that type of thing. If you basically lock down the user account so they're only able to do very specific things, even if the system is compromised, you should be okay. Don't log in as global administrator to check your email. And that means you. That means you, you grossly negligent administrator that just allowed a ransomware attack to happen on the systems. Again, think about that, right? Ransomware attacks. Real world. So you log in, because people do it, right? You create your username account, and you don't want to go back and forth, right? Oh, I got my administrator username account, and I got my normal user account. Maybe I've got other, system accounts. Oh, that's a pain in the ass, right? So you're sitting here, and you're logged in as a global administrator in order to check your email. Well, again, think about it, right? You're connected into the network. Then under the network, you got your web server, you got your database server, your whole bunch of things. On the database server, again, you've got root. Under root, where the hell is my SQL stored? I don't know. Maybe you created a database directory, and under that database directory, you create the actual database itself, right? And you're logged in as a global administrator. So when you click on that malicious app, right, that malicious app is now going to be able to run from your system as a global administrator. The interesting thing, again, if you're in the Microsoft world, if you're a global administrator, not only does that mean you're a root or you're the administrator of your system, but it also means you're the administrator of the entire damn network. So your thing starts going out, it starts trying to map the network to figure out what things look like. It goes, oh, look, this looks like it's a database server. Let me see if I can find a database file. It finds a database file, and then it encrypts the database file because as a global administrator, you have rights to encrypt crap that you want to encrypt, and everybody's life goes to hell, right? That is why we do not log in as administrator accounts. Let's see here. Again, directory tree security. Again, that's the same thing here. Again, we talk about security, we talk about privileges. If you go into any relational database management server software, almost all of them, other than SQLite, are going to have a privilege scheme, basically a security scheme. User accounts, rights, security policies for what specific users can do within the database itself. Right, so if I try to hack into the database and do select statements or insert statements or whatever else, right, if I don't have the proper username and password to actually be able to connect to the database, that's not going to work. But again, if I'm a hacker from Zimbabwe, I don't want to do select statements or any of that kind of crap. You know what I want to do? I just want to encrypt your damn entire database file and then get a whole bunch of Bitcoin out of you. And that's basically the idea about a directory tree security attack, is basically you're going after the files and not even worrying about the security that they have built in. With that, permissions and security, almost all services allow for some type of permission scheme. Make sure to fully utilize it on all layers of your application. The OS user account should be locked down. The account used to query the database should have specific privileges required for its task, so on and so forth. So again, when you're going to be creating your server, right, your server has an OS on it. So when you create the user accounts, or you're using, the www.-data account, if you're using Linux, make sure that is logged down so it can only do the exact things that you need it to do. Again, when it's going to be connecting to the database. If you're doing queries where all you're doing is doing select statements, then they don't need an update privilege. They don't need an alter privilege. They sure as hell don't need a delete privilege. So create an account that only is able to do select statements on particular tables to try to protect things. Let's see here. Talk about caching a little bit. Oh, and with this too, with permissions and security, do be careful about what kind of database you use. Again, SQLite. I love SQLite. I'm a fanboy of SQLite, but has major limits. You can literally open up a SQLite database in a text editor and take a look at what's inside. So again, SQLite is an awesome system. If you're doing basic log files, crappy IoT stuff, development environments, SQLite is great. On the other hand, SQLite, you can literally copy and paste the database as a file and then just open the damn thing. There is no security, none, nada, by default on SQLite, and the only way to get security into SQLite is to attach some third-party crap onto it. So you might as well use MySQL or Postgres or whatever else. Layer networks. You can't ping when you can't see. And again, once you start building out your architectures, these are some of the things to be thinking about. Right? So again, you talk about databases and all that kind of stuff. Right? If somebody's able to compromise your system, or able to get in, one of the things to think about is if everything is on the same LAN, subnet, right? 192.168.1.x, let's say. So your web server is there, and your SQL server is there, and your proxy server is there, and all the other servers are there, right? If somebody's able to get in there somehow, by hook or by crook, they're now able to see all the systems that are on your network, and if ports are open or anything else, they can start to try to attack that. One of the things to consider is actually building out, again, a layered network. This is a lot easier now. Again, back in the day, hardware was much more expensive. Hardware is relatively inexpensive now. And so that's where, again, like I say, you can have, your SQL cluster over here. You can have your web servers and the reverse proxy servers on their own system, right? You could even have some kind of storage array for all the data and everything somewhere else, and whatever, right? If somebody's able to compromise one of these networks, they're able to scan and relatively easily see whatever the hell is on that particular network, but trying to understand what the other layers look like and be able to compromise those layers is going to be a lot more difficult. Also with this, again, you put your firewall rules in there, so whatever the SQL port is, again, SQL port, you say only traffic from the 192.168.2.x network is able to access these particular ports through that particular firewall. Even if somebody is here and tries to connect, it will fail out because that is on a different subnet. Services versus servers. One of the things to be thinking about, again, from a security standpoint, when we think about architecture, where should this crap reside, right? Do you put it on a server? Do you put it on a physical server? A box? Do you put it on a virtual server, a virtual instance? Or do you use somebody's services? Right? So there's lots of database services out there that are actually really cool. If you've not looked at DigitalOcean's database services, you probably should. But one of the things to be thinking about is, what do you want to be responsible for? If you run your own server, a physical or VPS, you're responsible for everything, from server configurations to the OS updates to the CPU fan. Think about this. If you deploy a virtual server in order to provide services for whatever it is that you're doing, are you going to remember to update the damn thing? Ever. When you leave the company and you're gone for 5 years, is somebody else going to remember to update the damn thing? Right? This is a very serious thing to be thinking about. Again, you've got physical server. Lots of people have physical servers. You lie, you don't trust the cloud. Physical servers is where it's at. Here's the thing, what happens when the CPU fan fails on that physical server? Again, I've seen it. I've seen it too many times. All of a sudden, again, your system is down. Is that better than having it up in the cloud? Things to think about. Services decrease the plane of attack against your system from your perspective. So basically, from your perspective, if you use DigitalOcean, they have MySQL or Postgres, a whole bunch of other things, MongoDB. Again, go take a look at it. We're going to do classes in the future about it. One of the nice parts is you create the database, you create your privileges, you create that kind of stuff, and then you wash your hands of it. So again, from your perspective, the plane of attack against what you're responsible for the services is relatively small. You don't have to worry about CPU fans failing. You don't have to worry about OS updates. You don't have to worry about somebody shoving a USB stick in there doing something stupid, right? Your perspective. Though on the other hand, depending on the vendor, there may be a large plane of attack on the other side. So we saw this with Azure. So Microsoft, God bless them, their Azure services, they got attacked, about a year ago? And so it wasn't hacked on your side, it was hacked on their side. And that's when you go back to vendor trust. Of course I trust Microsoft. They're a huge trillion-dollar company. They wouldn't risk their security. Anyways. So yeah, I don't know. What is the answer? Again, this is what I want you to understand. There is no best answer. Almost no best answer. If you walk into a room and you say the best answer, anyways. Other things to be thinking about with your systems. Geo-blocking and auto-blocking. I think this is an interesting concept, especially in the 2020s, in the modern world, right? Everything's going to software as a service, everything's going to cloud, IP, globally accessible crap. One of the questions to ask yourself, though, is, why does anybody from Zimbabwe need to access your systems? Right? let's say you're developing apps for the #1 Texas barbecue franchise in the country, right? And so their presence is in Texas and Oklahoma and maybe New Mexico. They've got like 300 stores in those particular areas, and you're developing some kind of app to do something. At what point do you believe your target demographic is Zimbabweans? Where does that come from? Well, Eli, maybe the Zimbabweans, they want some Texas barbecue. Yeah, but if they want some Texas barbecue, they'll be in Texas. Ergo, they'll still have Texas IP addresses. Why would somebody in Zimbabwe ever access any of your systems? Does that make sense? So one of the things to be considering, again, when you're designing your stuff, just because theoretically the internet is globally accessible does not actually mean you want your systems to be globally accessible. Again, with basic IP geographic checks and that type of thing, you can pretty easily shut down your app so that only certain people or people in certain geographic areas are able to access certain things. Again, think about this like with geo-blocking. Let's say you're a company in Asheville. So you have some administrators that are here in Asheville, and so you need them to be able to do some updates, right? And so they need the rights. They need the security policies to be able to do some stuff. Well, here's the thing. If they're in Asheville, right, you probably can't geo-block. Geo-blocking specifically to Asheville will probably be a pain in the ass. It probably won't work out too well. But you probably could geo-block to North Carolina, right? And using VPN services. So maybe like, if you use TunnelBear or whatever, they have specific cities they go through. So if you have a VPN service, right, you could say, okay, in order to get to this, in order to be able to touch any of this, when you connect, you have to geolocate to either North Carolina or Atlanta, right? Because that would be the VPN. And then you're able to get in, right? With a username, password, other security. On the other hand, if you're trying to log in from Zimbabwe, nope. Auto redirected to CNN.com. Go away, right? Again, it's amazing, like I say, with that whole thing like with Twitter. And again, think about this with the remote workers. Really, again, consider this. Like there's this idea, okay, we have remote workers, so we have to be accessible from anywhere in the world. Really? How many remote workers do you have in Zimbabwe? Maybe not Zimbabwe. Just saying, right? And then auto blocking. Again, with a lot of these types of systems, there's something called fail to ban. Again, we'll have a class on that later. Fail to ban is pretty cool. In the Windows world, they have a version of fail to ban. I actually did a class on that years ago. Basically, auto configures firewall rules. So for your servers, for your systems, it'll actually auto configure firewall rules based off of basically failed attempts. If there are 10 failed attempts at port 22 from an IP address, it'll automatically block that IP address at port 22. Again, that's one of the things you have to worry about, like with IP address blocking. So if you watch some of the YouTubers talking about programming and IP address blocking, if you block an entire IP address, it can run you into some problems. So, right, if you have multiple users coming out of one building, or what's it called? NAT. If you're using carrier grade. If you're using carrier grade NAT, network address translation, you can get some stupid crap going on. Basically, if you block an entire IP address, right? So if you say I'm going to block 198.66.55.3, we're just not going to allow any traffic from that. That might cause problems because you might have hundreds or thousands of users theoretically under that particular IP address, again, using this thing called NAT in order to get out. Well, one of the things you can do is you can just block based off of port. So I'm not going to block this entire IP address. You can still get to my port 80. You can still get to my FTP port or whatever. But, 22, you're just not going to get to port 22. You're just, no port 22 for you. This is a way to be able to use auto blocking that should be more targeted without causing collateral damage. One of those things to consider. Authentication to systems. So if you're doing SSH, using keys, the SSL key instead of passwords. So there's a security certificate thing now. All the cool kids, they use certificates instead of usernames and passwords. Makes it a little harder for people to be able to hack or be able to guess, brute force attack. Things like multi-factor authentication. God help me, I'm not going to get into this. You want to talk about a stupid argument I don't want? Talking about multi-factor authentication will just go to hell. But anyways, there's lots of ways to do multi-factor authentication. There's RSA keys, there's the SMS messaging type thing, there's authenticator. There's a lot of ways to do multi-factor authentication. I'll let you people argue about that. But it's probably a wise thing for you folks to be thinking about doing, so that there's two things that need to be used in order for people to be able to access the systems. And then things like firewalls for SSH. And again, you can also do things like geo-blocking for things like SSH, so anybody coming in from China or Zimbabwe, right, is not able to get to your SSH. Encryption. Do make sure that you use encryption with your systems, if you need to. One of the things you have to think about with encryption is encryption encrypts your data. Makes it unusable, unless you have the proper key, to anybody. I ran into this problem, again, doing data recovery. Again, especially if you're in a developer environment, right? You're a young kid out there. You're trying to build systems. If you screw up your OS, or if you do something stupid on this app that you've been working on for like the past 2 months, and somehow that encryption, basically you're no longer able to access what has been encrypted, that data is basically gone. You basically performed a ransomware attack on yourself where nobody gets the Bitcoin. So that's one of the things to be careful about with things like encryption. Again, all these tools are valuable, but all tools are only valuable in the right place, right? Something to consider there. In what they call within rest and in transit. So what in rest means is that the data is encrypted while it is at rest on the system. So again, I talked about that before, like with SQLite. I love SQLite. By default, none of that horse crap is encrypted, right? Anybody can basically open it up on text file. So that's one of the things that you consider. Anything that has personal identifiable information, anything that talks about your infrastructure, anything like that, basically should be encrypted at rest. And then encrypted in transit basically means it needs to be encrypted when it's being sent between systems. Now, a lot of times when you think about encryption in transit, you think about like from the user up to the server. Again, SSL, that type of thing. One of the things you do need to be considering, again, we start talking about nation-state actors, is the NSA are just bastards. They're just bastards. Anyways, NSA did, so Yahoo, again, real story, a couple years ago. Fuck me. Anyways, I don't know why the NSA thought this was a wise idea, but the NSA basically went, and Yahoo had 2 data centers. And those data centers replicated data back and forth. Right, so you got a data center over here, and you got a data center over here, and they're replicating data back and forth, and they have a fiber line, so it's more than fast enough for the data replication. And so the NSA, on US soil, against an American company, spliced into that fiber line, and basically did a man-in-the-middle attack to read the data that was going back and forth. And somehow they thought this was constitutional. So anyways, an interesting thing to think about. Again, there's this idea. If I can see it, Eli, it's secure. Eli, I don't trust the cloud because that's in the cloud and it's insecure. Eli, I see this, therefore it's secure. Yeah, well, maybe, probably not. So one of the things you need to think about is even on your own infrastructure, is the data that is going between your different servers and, to different points or whatever, is it encrypted in transit? Could somebody splice to a man-in-the-middle attack or whatever else, essentially to see the traffic that is going on within your environment? Something to consider out there. And then certificate rotation, this is a big one. So certificates, you get certificates from certificate authorities. Let's Encrypt is probably the best way to go right now. Costs you nothing. Open source project, auto rotates your certificate. There has been security issues where certificates have gotten out from particular companies. Hackers have then used that certificate to basically pretend to be the company that they're trying to fish users from or whatever else. So one of the things that's wise to do is do certificate rotation, right? However long, month, 2 months, 15 days, whatever you want, but basically rotate through. So if your certificate does get out in the wild, you mitigate the length of time that is a vulnerability. Auditing is going to be a huge thing. You can't fix problems you don't see. Again, that's one of the big problems in our world. People build stuff. We spend so much time and energy to plan and document and build and deploy, and then we walk away from it. It was working last time I saw it. Right, anyways, that's not good, especially when you got a lot of people. A lot of people working on projects. Audit. Make sure your systems are still doing what the hell you think they're doing. You can't fix the problems you don't see, right? So again, if it's working, again, that's the whole thing with cybersecurity. If those hackers, those ninja hackers get into your system, they don't want to be seen. They don't want to be noticed. They want your systems to work as good as possible so they can siphon off as much data as possible. So just because your systems are working doesn't mean you haven't been compromised all hell and back. You look for things like old accounts, again, especially with large corporations. You may have lots and lots and lots of user accounts. People get fired. Nobody gets around to actually auditing, making sure the accounts are gone. There was a hacking attack where somebody got fired. It was a year later. The person worked for a competitor company, realized that they still had access to the old company systems, and they went in and had some fun. They did get caught. And that was a problem. That should not have happened. If somebody gets fired, again, what is the procedure? When somebody gets fired, what is the procedure? 1, for disabling and then eliminating their account. And 2, if for some reason that procedure gets missed, how will you find out about it going into the future? That's one of the big problems you see with procedures, is there's always a procedure for an event to happen. But if for some reason, as the world goes, that event doesn't happen, right? The delete or the disable process doesn't happen. There's no additional procedures to actually verify that thing did what it was supposed to do. Inappropriate permissions. Do people have the right permissions? Again, you got a lot of old infrastructure, especially when you start talking about like group security again, if you're talking about the Active Directory world. You may have had me from 15 years ago creating the permissions for these different group accounts. And, what I thought was a good idea to give users 15 years ago might not be a good idea to give users now. Is somebody going through and actually taking a look at all those different permissions and verifying people have permissions to what they should have. Patches, updates, and security settings. Again, if you're running your own physical boxes, what are they getting patched? Right? Patch updates are huge. Updating the settings, the rest of it. VPSs. You're running VPSs. Are you making sure you're actually getting all of the updates? That type of thing. And then code reviews. Again, when you actually create the code or when the code is about to go up on the systems, who actually sits down and verifies that this code is doing what it's supposed to be doing? And then on the other hand, too, once that code is up there, does anybody ever look at it again to verify that the first reviewer wasn't half drunk at the time? We talk about employees. Employees and contractors. Again, this is going to be your weakest link in your company. CEO told me a long time ago, we hire people too quickly and we fire them too slowly. And now if you have warehouse workers, that just means you're going to lose a little bit of money. If you have coders, not only is that going to cost you a hell of a lot more money, but if you fire people too slowly and they're adding code into your code base, that could be a pretty bad thing. What are the expectations for new hires? What is a win or a loss? We've seen this a lot at companies like Meta, right? Meta and Google and Amazon. We saw this over the past couple of years where they hired, right? COVID happened, and for some reason everybody hired 20,000 employees each. Why? Who knows? I don't know. Anyways, right? But you got these employees came in, and they were making 6 figures, making $150,000, they're making $200,000 a year. And then they were literally putting onto social media that they didn't know what their job was. I don't know what my job is, but the coffee's good. Right? That's funny. That's hilarious. Ha ha, Meta's stupid. But think about that with your company. When you bring on a new coder, when you bring on a new tech professional, when you bring on, what is a win for them? What is a loss? what is the actual expectation? Again, we used to have this. I don't know what's happened. It's been a long time since I've been an employee. We used to have expectations back in the day. Something happened to those, right? I used to know. I used to have a pretty good idea of whether I was winning or whether I was losing. A lot of this times in the modern world, though, that gets very, 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 very confusing. And so this can be a big problem with your company. Again, you start talking about security and that kind of thing because you start getting senior employees. Well, again, what makes a senior employee? A senior employee has been around for a while. Well, if you have a senior employee that's been elbow deep in the code for 3 years, understands the infrastructure, understands everybody, blase, 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 they've been around for 3 years, they should be a senior person. So a new person comes in and goes to that senior person and says, what should I do? That senior person will tell them what to do. Well, again, if you hire somebody, they don't really know what the hell to do with them. They're basically just sitting in a seat. And they stick around for a year, 2 or 3. They have now also been in your company for 3 years. And the new person comes in and asks the senior person what they should do. Oh, and then things start getting very, very, very bad for your company. So do you know with the hires? And again, if you're going to get hired, right? If you're getting hired by a company, do you know what a win looks like for you? Do you know what a loss? Do you know if you're being successful or whether you're failing? Because even if you're failing, I know that sounds harsh, but at least you know you're failing. If you know you're failing, you can try to do something about it. If they're just like, you're fine. It doesn't make me comfortable. Does the person have enough supervision? Do you have a trusted party that can verify their work? Again, as people are doing code and the rest of it, as they're deploying systems. What documentation procedures do they have that they can follow? Again, if you have a new person and they got confused, what's the documentation? I saw this before. I did a critique on it years ago. So a new developer, a junior developer, got hired by this company, and then they were given all this information for the production server. And then they were told to go take a look around. And then they wiped out the production server. Does that seem like a wise idea? Does it seem like a wise idea to give your junior admin full privileges to the production servers and tell them to look around? Again, also this thing with auditing. So one of the people that came to me for mentorship years ago, this was just brutal. They had $2,000 worth of text. They paid $200,000 for some of the ugliest ASCII I'd ever seen in my life. But again, we talk about like security and the company and all of it. And so this was a company full. It was funded. So they had $300,000 in funding. Anyways, and they had the founder, and they had the technical. So the co-founder, and they had the technical co-founder. So the one co-founder, he was an industry expert, knew the industry that they're in, and then had the technical co-founder, who was a fucking brick. God, he was worthless. Anyways. So they were building this app. They're taking us time, energy, all this kind of thing to build this web app. And they spent $200,000 on this PHP code. And it just didn't fucking work. It didn't work. This isn't like, the colors aren't right, or the divs don't line up, or whatever. Shit didn't work. So anyways, I was sitting there, I was talking to the guy about it. And I'm like, well, the first thing you need to do is you just need to audit the code. You need to sit there and take a look at the code that they're writing and figure out what the hell's going on. He's like, you lie, I don't know coding. I'm like, well, one, it's PHP. You're doing a tech startup company. PHP isn't that goddamn hard. If somebody gave you $300,000 for your equity, I think you can spend 40 hours to learn a little bit of PHP. But anyways, I was like, fine, whatever, I'm not getting that argument. I'm like, look, just give it to your technical co-founder. You said all these amazing things about your technical co-founder. So your technical co-founder should be able to audit PHP. Nope. The technical co-founder was an amazing, wonderful technical co-founder that had zero ability to audit, to even read PHP code that they had spent $200,000 for. Now think about this from a security standpoint, and everything we've discussed up until this point in time. When your technical co-founder is not able to read PHP, what the hell is in your code? And imagine if they actually still had enough money to bring on developers and the rest of it, what the hell would their code base look like if their technical leads can't even read it? Data fetish. The data you don't have can't be compromised. There's this weird thing, again, the mentalities, you'll find this if you've been in the technology world for any length of time, as we get these mentalities. There's these truisms that come through. And one of the current truisms is data is the new oil. I have no idea why. It's not. It's not. But anyways, there's this idea that data is the new oil. And so you need to collect so much data on everybody. Anyways, so they're collecting all this data. They're collecting a tremendous, insane amount of data on all of us. Every single transaction, every single web page request, the whole 9 yards. One of the things to be thinking about with modern regulations, GDPR in Europe, US regulations that are coming through, California is pushing through regulations, is if you have personally identifiable information that gets compromised, your company can get sued and you can have a lot of problems if that gets out in the wild. Again, it goes back to the old executive protection thing. It's not simply about protecting the data. It's also asking, do we need to collect this data in the first place? Right? Every amount of personally identifiable information is a vulnerability for your company. Think about every piece of personal identifiable information is a possible $1,000 fine. Every piece, every record is a possible $1,000 fine. If you start thinking about personally identifiable information, as in every single record could be a $1,000 fine, will you think about collecting data just slightly differently than how your company currently collects data or how you plan to collect data? And so one of the big questions that I have, again, with a lot of this stuff, is do you really need to collect this damn much data? Again, all I'll say is I've been on Google. I have been a YouTube professional since 2009. Google has a tremendous amount of data about all kinds of my preferences. And I still never click on a banner ad. In 15 years of their data collection on me, they still can't provide me a banner ad that I want to click on. Maybe the data fetish isn't working out so well. When you're going to be collecting the data, think about articulating a reason that you're collecting the data that you do. Again, because everyone's like, data is the new oil. Fine. Okay, so if data is the new oil, if I have oil, I know what I can do with oil. I can put oil in an oil lamp. I can use oil to create gasoline to drive a car. There's all these things that I can do with oil, right? Why is oil valuable? I can articulate the reasons that oil is valuable. So if data, this data that you want to collect, is the new oil, all you have to do is articulate why the hell this data is valuable. That's it. If you can't do that, maybe you don't need to be collecting the data. Let's see here. Do other things to think about. Do other things correlate to personal identifiable information? I think this is one of the big things. This is how marketing used to work, right? Marketing used to work is that companies such as Vogue or Nordstrom or Kmart or whatever, they would survey their customers. And they would come up with basically the demographic profile of what their customers are, right? And so you could say a Nordstrom customer, by and large, is X, Y, or Z. So I used to, when I had my company, I used to run ads in the city paper. So there's things, something called the city paper, free indie paper in Baltimore. Anyways, they had all this demographic information, right? Their newspapers went out, they would go and do surveys, and they would figure out, right, the approximate age of the readers of the city paper, the approximate income of the city paper, approximately where people come from who collected the city paper, the whole 9 yards. Right? It's not pinpoint accurate. It's not pinpoint accurate. But it's also not horrible. It's also not horrible. And so one of the things to be thinking about is with data is, do you really need all this data? Or can you correlate other things with the data? Instead of knowing specifically this personally identifiable person, is there other things that you can correlate to? It's like, look, we are getting, again, with geographic information from IP addresses. What if you take the IP address, you do the geo database, and you get back what county the person is in. I know what county, state, and city this person is in, and then I dump the rest of the information. And then you can go and you can find out demographic information about that county. You can know in that county, the average, household income is X, the average household property is Y, the racial demographic is Z, the whole 9 yards. So instead of storing all of these very specific IP addresses, right? You got the IP address with the geodata, with all the stuff for the specific computer they're using, very personal identifiable stuff. What if you just say, yeah, we had 5,000 people from this particular county come and use our site last month. Based off of that, this is how those demographics should break down. Can you get good enough information without having to go, elbow deep into getting people's personally identifiable information? Things to be thinking about when you store data is hashing data. So this is basically what's used with your passwords. What happens is when you plug in your password, hopefully, who knows, whatever app that you're using, web app that you're using, when you log into Facebook or Instagram or Bob's web app, right? They don't actually store your password. They don't store your password. What happens is when you create your password, there is what's called a hashing algorithm that turns your password into something called a cryptographic hash. And so this cryptographic hash, you should not be able to unencrypt it, right? So basically, it turns it into an encrypted string. Well, the interesting thing there is then in the future, when I want to log into my account, I type in my password. The password that I type in will then, using the same mechanism, be turned into a cryptographic hash, and basically what gets matched is that hash. So I'm not seeing password 1. I'm seeing the cryptographic hash of password 1 and comparing it to the cryptographic hash of also password 1 to verify those things match. Again, things to be thinking about if you're trying to deal with basically tracking user accounts. Again, IP addresses, if you look at GDPR, that gets scary in a heartbeat. Things like tracking IP addresses might get you into trouble with Europe and with new privacy laws. But you're sitting there and you're like, well, but IP addresses are a very useful way for identifying individual users. So one of the things you could think about is instead of storing the actual IP address, you run the IP address through your hashing mechanism, and then you simply compare hashes in the future. Okay, we get a new IP address, we hash that IP address, we match that hash to something in the past, we flush the IP address, and now we're matching hashes instead of the actual IP address. Still might get you into trouble, but it also might be a little bit better for you. Again, something to be thinking about from the cybersecurity standpoint is regulations and laws. Again, that executive protection thing, you're there to protect your principal. Just because you did your job, if your company tanks, you're still at fault. Right? PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, any number of other regulations that are coming down the pike. Governments will only get stricter about these regulations. Do you understand for your target demographics what the regulatory environment looks like? And then again, this goes back to that whole geo-blocking thing. Again, Europe's getting weird. I'm just going to leave it on the table. We're not here for my criticisms and critiques. We're not going to go there. But I got to say, Europe's getting a little weird. Now look, if you're Facebook, you got to deal with Europe. If you're Google, you got to deal with Europe. If you're Bob's web app out of Oklahoma, do you necessarily want to deal with Europe? Right? Right? If users in Europe are able to access your services and you do something that they don't think is legit, they can still try to punish the hell out of you. Again, So one of the things to be thinking about is, again, for the target demographics that you're going after, do you understand what that regulatory environment looks like? And again, do you want to put up geo-blocks? Right? If you're like, look, I'm a little worried about that GDPR thing, no Europe. Right? That might be better from a security standpoint, right? Your CEO might be like, oh, this is ridiculous. Why can't Europeans come and learn about our Texas barbecue? And they're like, well, they can if they fly into Houston and use a Houston IP address. But otherwise, it's Texas. we run our technology like we run the rest of Texas, and that might not be copacetic with the French government, so let's just make sure Europeans cannot get in. Again, things to really be thinking about. Paying for services that are compliant may be cheaper than rolling your own. Again, anything that deals with personally identifiable information is an important thing to be thinking about. Is again, the whole PCI compliance thing, right? Because like with PCI compliance, like with a lot of this compliance stuff, there's a lot that goes into it. Physical security, encryption at rest, encryption in transit, physical security. There's a lot of things, a lot of auditing processes, official auditing processes companies have to go through in order to become compliant with some of this stuff. And so again, you might be like, well, Eli, dude, I can just use a Raspberry Pi and use that as our file server. And from a technical standpoint, that might actually work. Again, depending on your usage, it might be fine from a technical standpoint. But if you're dealing with personally identifiable information, any of that kind of thing, simply going with a compliant service might be a hell of a lot cheaper. Again, one of the things to be thinking about too is like how much professionals cost and how much professionals are going to cost your boss, right? My minimum fee back in the day was $100 an hour, right? I was basically getting about 150 plus per hour, and that was over 10 years ago doing pretty crappy work, right? If you call in technology professionals nowadays as consultants, man, they're going to cost you $200, $250 an hour. It's going to cost your company $250 just for that bastard to get a cup of coffee. That guy comes in your workplace, walks over to the cup of coffee, he's billing you as he goes to get a goddamn cup of coffee. And so if you're like, well, it's ridiculous, this compliance service, it costs $100 a month. Okay. I'll take that all day long. And I never have to worry about hiring a consultant? Anyways, just because your web app can be accessed from anywhere, it doesn't mean that you want it to be. So again, things to be thinking about from regulations. Oh, almost done. Almost done. Buy-in. Again, we talked a lot about humanity today, but it's true. It's true. Eli, I didn't get into tech to deal with office politics. Well, sorry. Without buy-in from vested interest, your work is going to be brutally, brutally difficult. Talk about vested interest. This is anybody that has any reason to care about what the hell you're doing, right? The janitor probably doesn't care about the servers, but the secretary does. The warehouse worker does. The CEO and the CTO does. Right? One of the big problems people have is they put CEOs on a pedestal and they put warehouse workers down here. And I can tell you, the people that will make your life really miserable are the warehouse workers. Buy them some donuts and coffee every once in a while. Make your life a lot easier, right? So one of the things you want to do is you want to get buy-in from the vested interests and basically have a friendly relationship so they don't want you to suffer. Eli, why am I going to buy this $10,000 server? Honestly, the $10,000 server is going to save us about 5 hours of work per week. My wife is about to fucking divorce me. And if she divorces me, I'm going to lose my damn mind. And that's probably not going to be good for any of us, is it, sir? Oh, no, it probably isn't going to be good for any of us. Great. Can I have a $10,000 server? Thank you. Right? Again, going out, being friendly with people, drinking the beers, doing the stupid crap. I never got into golf. I got to admit it, I could never do golf. I tried golf. Golf is a bridge too far. But anyways, right, being friendly with people. You need the resources and authority from execs to be able to build, deploy, and maintain solutions. They need to trust you even when they can't see why. Right? Because that's one of the big things with security. Right? A lot of this other stuff, if you buy a computer, they understand. I spent $2,000, I got a new computer. They may still argue about it, but at least they understand what the hell they're getting. Right? A new networking equipment, I spend $10,000, network works faster. Right? They get it. Fiber optic, they get it. There's a lot of stuff out there. Again, they may not like it. They're not going to like it. But at least they get it. Right? I spent X amount of money, I got something for it. One of the problems you're going to be dealing with security is if security works well, nobody knows. Nobody knows. You work 100 hours a week just so nobody knows that you exist, right? Because if somebody knows that security is worried, there's a lot of cybersecurity, it probably means there's something glitchy as hell. or the user experience is shit, or you're getting hacked to high hell and back. Right? The system should be as smooth as possible. So the problem then is, how do you get the execs to write six-figure checks when they're not even going to notice the damn results? And this is why our life sucks a lot of time. And that's why you have to build rapport. That's why you have to know their kids' names. That's why you have to know their dogs' names. That's why you have to know their wife's birthday. Right? Why does their spouse's birthday have a damn thing to do with your new firewall? Because if they trust you, if they like you, if they respect you, when you ask for 20 grand or whatever for a new firewall, they're more likely to say yes, right? And that's a difficult thing in the security world. And again, that's why befriending people and all that kind of stuff is so frickin' vitally important. Again, I remember having this conversation. This is a brutal conversation. And again, it's where it's like, oh, our industry is so fucked up. So one of my mentors, I don't know if he was a mentor, one of my seniors, he was the first guy to give me an actual tech job way back in the day. He ran his own consulting company, right? Anyways. And it sucked. Again, respect the hell out of him. Like him, he's a wonderful guy, respected the hell out of him, and still was like, fuck, I hate this conversation. Anyways, so with his clients, he had managed service contracts, right? You pay X amount of money per month, and he's just your IT department. And so we were going through. And so I was the young buck, and I believe in standardizing crap to high hell and back, checklists, and making everything solid. And one of the things I found is once XP Service Pack 2 came out, you could really make systems solid. Pre-Service Pack 2 is Wild West. After Service Pack 2, as long as you knew what to do and you batten down the hatches, you can make most systems pretty stable and pretty secure. And so I was talking to him one day because I had gone and I'd helped him with one of his clients. And his clients, they're quirky. They were much their systems were much quirkier than my client systems were. And so afterwards, we're just sitting there having a cup of coffee, and like, yeah, I don't understand. I mean, again, he was good. He knew what to do and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, I mean, the systems seem kind of janky. I mean, and especially if they're paying you the maintenance contracts and all that. I mean, shouldn't all that get cleaned up? And I still remember. He just looked at me and drank his cup of coffee, and he's like, well, here's a problem, Eli. Right, every time that the maintenance contracts come back up again, guys go in there and argue for the upgrades or whatever else, for him actually getting paid. And he's like, look, if they don't see any problems, then they're not going to see any reason to keep paying me. It was like, what? But it was true. And that's the thing. And it's a weird psychological way to keep a job. So if they fired him outright, after a couple of months, the systems would go to hell, right? Just because you're maintenance, right? You stop maintaining things, crap goes down. But if everything works seamlessly, then the executives start seeing that they don't need to pay so much money for support, and then they fire you, and then it's just bad for everybody. You get fired, a couple months later, their systems go to hell, you're pissed off, so you tell them to go bugger themselves, and it's just kind of, everybody cries. So is there a value in leaving, a manageable amount of quirks in the system? Man, it's a question. I will leave that question for you folks to be thinking about. You need the supervision services of mid-level managers to make sure procedures are being followed by employees. So again, in order to get the budgets, in order to get the okays, you need the execs to give you the budget and the okays. From the mid-level managers, though, you need them to actually make sure that the employees are doing whatever the hell they're supposed to be doing, right? If you come in with a new CRM solution, if you come in with a new telephone solution or whatever else, if the employees aren't doing whatever the hell it is that they're supposed to do, that's not going to work. So you need to kiss ass the mid-level managers. Make sure you're friendly with them. And again, you need the mid-level managers to respect you enough that they don't just swipe a credit card and create their own shadow IT. And that's the other thing too, with those mid-level managers, right? They're smart. They're not executives, but they're smart. and they know how much they get in bonuses. And if they can swipe a credit card for $20 a month to get a $20,000 bonus, so you gotta do a little psychological manipulation to make sure that they don't swipe that goddamn credit card. And then you need the employees to not actively try to circumvent your systems and to be able to tell you when they see problems. Again, that's the other big thing too, is you can't fix problems that you don't see. If the employees are not comfortable to come and talk to you or whoever the point of contact is, then you're not going to know when there's problems, and that's going to cause a lot of disaster. So office politics matters. Know people's kids' names. Know what types of dogs people have. One of the big things too is to understand how businesses actually work, especially how your business actually operates. One of the most interesting lessons that I learned, again, everybody knows, Eli, CEO, sign the checks. Oh yeah, they do. But you know who writes the checks? This is a very important lesson. Secretaries write the checks for the CEOs to sign. And it's amazing how much power, whatever the hell they're called nowadays, admin assistants have. It's amazing how much power admin assistants have. Right? You kiss up to that admin assistant, CEO's like, fuck this guy, I don't want to deal with this crap anymore. The admin assistant's like, well, I understand what you're saying, but he makes my life a lot easier. So if you don't want me to lose my goddamn mind, we'll keep paying him. All right? Understand how your business actually operates. Talk about anything in the world other than tech with fellow employees. You're not a geek, you're just a peer in a different department. One of the things that I've found, again, especially it's weird in the tech world, I don't understand what it is. People see you as a tech person and again, they start putting all kinds of stories onto you and all kinds of horse crap. So one of the things to be thinking about, again, with your company is how can you create relationships with the people in your company that's outside of whatever it is your job is. You're not a senior level developer. You're not a senior engineer. You're not a junior developer. You just happen to be an employee that may work at a different department than this other person. And just sit there and bullshit and talk, right? And try to humanize, or try to be humanized is more of an important thing. Understand what your company does and how. Offer to buy execs and warehouse workers a cup of coffee so you can better understand what they do. Again, that's one of the big problems with technology professionals, right? I don't know what the hell's going on with tech professionals anymore. Lost their damn minds. Yeah, how good are you at accounting? You good at accounting? Really? You good at using a lathe? Are you a lathe expert? Some of you might be, right? If you look around your company, right, are you an expert at all these different tasks? No, right? Again, people get hired to do specific tasks. You do the task long enough, you become a professional. That's just how it is. But there's this weird thing with a lot of tech professionals. They believe they are the important ones at the company and everybody else is peons. That's a bad way to go. Right? By understanding what your company does, again, pain points, all of that kind of stuff, it can make life a hell of a lot easier, especially when you're thinking about things like cybersecurity. Again, when you start thinking about how you're going to lock down your systems, understanding how your users are actually using the systems might make your life a lot easier for basically how you're going to try to lock down and close down the systems, right? If you're not listening to them and you just try to shove policies down their throats, it's going to be a bad day. You can do education and made-up positions. Made-up positions is a beautiful thing. You are the IT lead for this office. Yeah. And then you come to the office and they walk out. Hello. Yeah, I'm the IT lead for the office. People are like, oh, did you get a pay raise for that? No, that position doesn't exist. I made it up. Makes him happy. Right? So things to be thinking about. Run brown bag security briefings, classes for employees. So one of the biggest things, again, if you can get the employee buy-in, if you can get the people buy-in for what you're trying to accomplish, makes life a hell of a lot easier. So think about, can you get the executives to buy a couple of pizzas and some soda or whatever else, and over lunch you're going to do security briefings about what man-in-the-middle attacks are, why this, right? Because a lot of people want to learn more about technology. They want to learn about AI. They want to learn about these things. And so if you can get the executives to buy some lunch, they get some free lunch, they get some education, and so this stuff that they seem really cool. And in that process, you're kind of changing their mindset on how these systems work. That can make life a lot easier. Everyone loves pieces of paper. Create your own Uber cybersecurity admin certificate that employees can earn. If you come to 5 brown bag sessions, you get a cybersecurity certificate you can put in your LinkedIn resume. Wow. Yep, it is accredited by my Chihuahua. Roxy's stamp of approval. People like pieces of paper. It's weird, but it's true. You might get them to come. Get them in there for 5 freaking hours to explain why they stop doing stupid crap on the network. People love gold stars. Again, create a cybersecurity liaison role for departments and then do brown bag trainings or debriefing sessions. Again, think about this whole auditing thing. Again, auditing for security or whatever else. Can you give somebody a title? Chief, security, blah, blah, blah. And then just literally ask them once a week to do an audit. It's amazing how much work people will do just for that. I think about that because back when I did the emergency response stuff and all that, I was part of a militia. I was part of a real militia. I was part of a state constitutionally mandated militia. We actually worked with the military and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, so I left that militia for a while, whatever. I got my normal jobs and all that, and I hadn't been there for a while. And I ran into somebody that was part of it. I was like, oh, hey, what have you guys been doing lately? Is there anything interesting, exciting? And it was hilarious. This is a true story. He was like, yeah, it's great. We got deployed to Texas. I was like, yeah, damn. Crap. I wish I was still with you guys. I could have gotten deployed to Texas. I was like, wow, what did you do in Texas? He was like, oh, we dug holes. Yeah, I shit you not. That was his actual statement. I was like, I'm sorry, what? He was like, yeah, the National Guard, I don't know, immigration horse shit or whatever else. They brought militia folks in to dig holes in Texas. He was so proud of that. He got to be in his BDUs as a militia member, digging holes in Texas. Never doubt how much god-awful work people will do for a gold star. I just had to walk away from that one. Gamify your employees and do not destroy your systems. How can you gamify the concept of don't blow my crap up? That is one of the things to be thinking about. So anyways, there is the class. I don't know. Is it cybersecurity for programmers? It's cybersecurity. I don't know, for tech people that maybe code sometimes. I don't know. Again, I'm creating all these classes. As we go, I modify them, I change them. I might change the title of them to make them more appropriate. I'm just figuring it out as I go. Again, here in Asheville, we have had a biblical flood, and that is a hell of a thing to run your brain through. So anyways, with that, again, that's basically the class. Participants left. Does anybody have a question? Hand up. No questions. I need to hop to another meeting. Thank you. Yep, again, the videos will be up on YouTube in a bit of time, so it'll be there. Hi, sir. Do any software company out there that can encrypt any data file of any data type and the data itself becomes self-governing or can report back to you? So security at the data layer, also that doesn't use the conventional private key management issue. I don't know. So basically, like with the data, so how data encryption works is basically you have data, then you have some kind of software, and then you have a key, an encryption key. And so basically the software uses the key to encrypt the data. And then that data is either sent or it's accessed later, and then you have a piece of software that uses key. Again, it's either the same key or public-private, that gets into its own world. Anyways, uses a key to decrypt. So basically, you have the software, you have the key, and you have the data itself. So basically what this person is asking is there anything that just does that? So I guess the software mechanism and the key, obviously, and the data are all just one thing. I don't know. Not that I know of. Not that I know of. Not that I know of. Somebody can put in down below or in the comment section if they know of something, but I do not. Thank you for such a wonderful class. See you at the next one. Yeah, the presentation has been some of the most entertaining and informative seminar I've been to. Hopefully next time around we can discuss more industry and the requirement to get into cybersecurity roles in the industry. Maybe a little bit. Find somebody that's hiring for cybersecurity roles and go get those. I get into a lot of trouble when I talk about getting cybersecurity jobs. People like to call me an idiot. I am the smartest dumb person you're ever going to meet in your life. I don't know. One of the big things, again, if you want to get into cybersecurity and all that kind of stuff, is basically what I would say is start trying to network and start trying to find places and companies and get ins with companies that will give you some type of opportunity. Again, like it's like one of the reasons I dislike a global audience, right? Brazil and all that. I love a global audience because from my basement, I can train somebody in Brazil, and I can train somebody from Ethiopia, and I can train somebody from down the block. Like that's fucking amazing. That's fucking amazing. Wonderful about the internet. But one of the big problems that a lot of people don't understand is that when you're actually going to get a job, it's much more geographic. Again, one of the things I talk about is like, especially with Europeans, is the way that I try to explain how I see their economy is like, hey, European, you know how you see our healthcare system and our gun laws? Yeah, that's how I see your economy. Just so we get it, right? You have universal healthcare and an economy I just can't get my damn brain around. And it really is, right? It's a real issue, right? You know, I've had it was that Sudanese guy who was Ethiopian. It was so I used to do the meet. So I used to do Zoom meetings and try to help people. And there was this kid, and again, he was like he was fucking zooming in. I mean, God bless, that's amazing. That's right. He's zooming in from like southern Ethiopia, and he's from Sudan, which is amazing. He's like, how do I get a job? Like, fuck, I don't know, dude. You're in southern Ethiopia. I don't know. And so that's where, like, with that kind of thing, and that's where, like, again, it's important to understand too, it's not, don't simply focus on what people say, because people can say anything. Right? That 300-pound, right, half asthmatic can start talking about how we're at war. And you're like, okay, great, run 5 miles and lay some cover fire. If we are, right? It's easy to flap your gums. It's much harder to actually do, right? I'm not worried about that 300-pound, pale person sweating to go up one set of stairs who's talking about going to war. I'm worried about that guy going to Walmart and buying 2,000 rounds of ammunition, right? There's talking, and there's buying 2,000 rounds of ammunition. So one of the things you'll notice that I'm talking about here is, again, Asheville tech scene is trash. Asheville's tech scene is barely a mirage, right? It appears to have a tech scene. Right? And so that's why I'm trying to create that pipeline to Raleigh. What if we can do training here? We can train up people here. I can also have a presence in Raleigh. And so by having the presence in Raleigh, so the research triangle is real. It's been real for years. It will continue to be real for decades more. Again, whether things go up or down, it'll be somewhere doing pretty good, right? They've got Google and they got Microsoft, and they got bandwidth. Anyways, they got a lot of stuff going on. So what I am literally doing, my actions, right, is I'm trying to create that presence in Raleigh so that we can start doing classes there. So I can do classes here in Asheville. When I do a class in Raleigh, if people are able to come from Asheville to Raleigh, they can come there and they can see what things are like there and start to know people and create their own community. And I can also try to pull people from Raleigh to come to Asheville so they see what's going on in Asheville and they start to meet Asheville people so we can start to create that pipeline, so we can start to create those relationships. But this is what I'm actually doing, because even in some place like the United States, tech industry isn't necessarily what you think the tech industry is, right? And so that's the important thing to be thinking about, whatever the hell it is you want to do, cybersecurity, gaming, whatever else, is you need to be thinking about how do you create that community? How do you create those relationships? And it's long, and it's painful, it's hard. It's like, Eli, that's easy to say. It's like, yeah, it's right. It's easy for a 300-pound to flap their gums about being at war. It's a lot harder to do the work, right? And that's the thing. Like, so we had to evacuate. So with Asheville, the power was out. The water was out. We had no water pressure. And not only that, we couldn't poop. We have a sewer pump. So literally, in order for my poop to get to the sewer, we have to have power. So we can only flush our toilets like once every 2 days. So no power, no water, and literal poop rotting in our toilets for 2 days at a time. So anyways, we had to evacuate. We evacuated. And that was one of the things. It was like, okay, where do we evacuate to? And so for me, it was like, let's go to Raleigh. Like, I know a little bit about Research Triangle. I know some stuff going on there. Let's go to Research Triangle or Raleigh for a week and a half so that I can start creating relationships. And so I went there. I went to a Durham meetup, I went to the All Things Open meetup, met some people there, went to another meetup over in Chapel Hill. Again, with that, created a little bit, just a little bit of nut meat of just like a hook into Raleigh. And so with that, I was able to get tickets to All Things Open. You know, I was able to beg. They gave me some tickets. I was like, hey, I'm an evacuee from Asheville. Can I have tickets? Fuck, here you go. Anyways, so I got the tickets to All Things Open. So now I got to go back to Raleigh again on Saturday. And I'll be there Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, come back on Wednesday. So that'll create, more. So I'll be there for 3 full days, schmoozing, go there at 8 o'clock in the morning, don't leave, right, until the last moment at the social. So we get those relationships going. And then you slowly build that up. And again, like I said, that's the thing with business, is everybody wants that sale. Again, whether it's selling a product or selling yourself. Everybody wants that now. How do I get the quick sell? And as I'll tell you, I've done quick sells. Right, it's wonderful. Here's product, sell product, done. But that's not really how it works in the real world. Again, whether it's getting hired or whether it's selling a product. Again, like I had like one of the things I talk about. So I remember this one surveillance system we sold. A guy had heard about it from my business partner, walked in, I demoed it. He was like, I want that. It was great. I was like, great, when can we install it? 8 months. I'm like, what? He knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted that. He knew why he wanted it. He just, business. He wasn't going to be able to install it for 8 months. And that's the other thing too. It's like with the relationships. It's not, everybody wants that quick. They want that Cinderella moment. That moment, right? The prince, the founder looks down upon the dirty step geek and rises them up and puts on a silver slipper or some weird ass crap. It's not really how it works. How it works is you go to a meetup or you go to an event and you feel like a jackass. That sucks. I don't know anybody. Nobody knows me. I feel like a dumbass. And somebody comes up to you and starts talking. And you start talking. And it's very strange too because you don't know what the hell to talk about. You talk to a couple more people. And then by the end of the night, you feel a little good. You feel a little good. Right, and then you come back to the next event. And you get there. And you see a couple people that you met last. Oh, you go talk to them. Again, it's not great, but they say, what do you do? Again, oh, this is what I do. Oh, hey, have you talked with that person over there? Oh, what is that person? Oh, that person. Oh, you go talk to that person. And they start talking to you. And they're looking at you. Oh, fine, I don't give a shit about you. Oh, you want to be an employee? Yeah, I got a lot of those. I like half as many. Last thing I want to do is hire an employee. Hey, Bob! What? Hey, this jackass here wants to get hired by somebody. You hiring? No, I'm not hiring. No, I'm not fucking hiring. He's not fucking hiring. You know, have you met Phil? Yeah, Phil. Where the fuck's Phil? I don't see Phil. Phil's probably going to come a little bit later. Ugh. Phil's so dumb. Phil's so dumb. He likes employees. He might actually want to hire you. So when Phil comes, go talk to Phil. Like, fuck. Kind of sit there, look at that jackass for half an hour. The guy Phil comes in. Hey, Phil. Oh, Phil's like, oh, so what do you do? Oh, this is what I do. Oh, wow. Oh, that seems very interesting. Yeah, we don't have any openings right now, though. I would hire, but we don't have any openings right now. That's it. I don't know. 4 months later, you get a job. 2 years later, you're doing YouTube videos about how you got into the tech industry. Man. Yeah, let's see here. I guess big cities in Texas probably going to be the best bet then, because apparently all the big techs are moving there. Yeah, big cities in Texas are probably a good bet. I mean, you know, depending on what you want out of life. Affordable standard of living, affordable cost of living. That's good in the United States. Yeah, a lot of tech companies are actually moving there. I think there'd be a lot of opportunities. I would, yeah. I mean, like if I was trying to get my leg up, if I was a youngin in the modern world, I think I'd probably look at Texas. Because again, cost of living is a big deal. You know, my wife and I, we travel around the country and we think about different places of living. And one of the places we agreed not to go. Like, we traveled all around the country for a year. We had a travel trailer, did the whole thing, right? Did not set foot in California. Didn't set foot in that damn state. And it was just the cost of living. It's like, we just looked at it, and again, we've done fine in life, we've done fine, but it was like, you know, we can either live like people that have done fine in life, or we can have like a 500 square foot box. Like, I was looking at that. So this was like before real estate went to hell with COVID. In the beginning of COVID, because we were looking at a movie again, I was thinking, oh, maybe San Diego or whatever. Motherfucker, San Diego was like $1 million for a 700 square foot house. And again, if you got the money, fine, whatever. Right? If that amount of money doesn't matter to you, God bless, go live in San Diego. Again, I'm not bashing people who live in San Diego. Because I'm not sure how that money works. That math don't math. Where the nice thing is, again, if you look at Houston, maybe Dallas, not Austin anymore. But if you look a lot at the Texas cities, the one thing that I've got to say is you can probably afford a place to live. You can probably get a job, any kind of job, some kind of job, that allows you to live there reasonably well. And then as you live there reasonably well, you can schmooze and do all the other horse shit in order to get in the tech industry, and then you can go from there. Because that's the biggest problem. Again, once you got like 3 years experience, once you have 3 years experience, you got a head on your shoulders, and you actually try to solve problems, right? You solve problems, you don't just get certificates. You'll be fine enough. Again, there's ups and downs. There's ups and downs. Recessions are real. Been through a few of them. Anyways, but you should be fine enough. That issue is that how the fuck do you get that first step? Again, I mean, I got my certifications during the .com boom. So during the .com boom, I had my Army certifications, but those were electronics. It wasn't computers. I had a college degree, and I was going through the MCSE program. And even then, this was a point in time when the jobs for computer people in the newspaper, we still dealt with paper newspapers back then, but the jobs just for computer people were the size of like newspapers now. Right? It was like 10 pages of fucking jobs. That's how many jobs it really were, right? And again, I would go to career fairs and I'd do all these other things. And even then, at the height of the insanity, right? They would say, once you have 6 months experience, you're golden. And then they'd be like, we don't got anything for you. I'm like, what? Well, you don't have 6 months experience. And they're like, 6 months experience, you're going. And even then, and I was like, I got military, I got a college degree, plus I've gone through this MCSE program, and even then, they still demanded at least 6. And so that's like, man, that first rung of getting the tech end up sucks. And so that's the issue, right? You go to the Seattles of the world, you go to the San Francisco's of the world, you go to the New York's of the world, right? If you've got to get up that first rung in basically poverty conditions, that sucks. That's a really hard lift. Whereas again, if you can go to Houston and you can deliver pizzas, might not be great, but you can deliver pizzas in order to pay the bills, and you got a pretty okay life, and you go to meetups, you get some certifications, you build some stuff, you throw it up on a GitHub. That's a better way to get up that ladder a little bit. At least that'd be my advice. Oh, if you are at all interested, look into the small company based in Nashville, Certainty Corp. They provide data layer encryption at rest, in transit, and in use. No need for managing public-private keys with the use of their agent. Check it out, crazy stuff. Thanks for your class, we all appreciate it. Cool. I will look at that. So anyways, I think that's about all I got. Oh, fuck me, it's 5:12. Oh shit! No, actually, there is an issue. So, outside of frame, I actually have something to do. I probably have a text message or two I have to respond to. So this was today's class. Friday, we're going to be having a class on deploying the Bottle web app framework. So we've been dealing with Bottle web app. I realized in order to tell you guys how to deploy this crap to actually up and do production environment type of deal. So I'll show you how to do that. We use Bottle. We have to change the configurations for Bottle a little bit to make it work. We use something called Gunicorn, which is a Python web server. We use Nginx. We set up a service, and then you can deploy your web app up to DigitalOcean, and we'll do that class on Friday. Again, next week I'm going to be going to Raleigh, so I'm not quite sure when the next class will be. And then also, again, we are going to start having the classes, in-person classes here in Asheville. That'll probably be in the next couple of weeks, and I'm trying to figure out the whole Raleigh thing. And that is all I got for today. So with that, I gotta run. Really gotta run. See y'all later.